Chapter 87, Strong Attack versus Strong Attack. At the highest point of the waterfall, a flame suddenly appeared. This flame wasn't eye-catching, extremely faint, almost invisible as it burned silently. However, it was like the flame was dropped into oil, not water. Flames quickly spread across the top of the waterfall. On the top half of the waterfall, a cool flame flickered its crystal-clear tongues. The waterfall was instantly lit up by the cool flame. Each water-like sword energy became shrouded in a ball of fire. Li water was like fire as it fell down. The first sword energy shrouded in fire quickly landed in the water. Boom! A clear sound of explosion. A large section of the water dragon instantly was destroyed, water spraying everywhere. Boom 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 boom. The stream of explosions were like fireworks, ringing endlessly. Wen Fei's expression changed. What sword move was this? Didn't the other practice a water element sword scripture? Why would there be fire? At this moment, he didn't have the leisure to think. In the blink of an eye, only a small half of the water dragon remained after the explosions. The other's sword energies had increased in power due to those harmless-looking clear flames. Suppressing the uncertainty inside, the last bit of underestimation in his heart dissipated. He now saw Xuemo as the greatest opponent he had ever faced. Wen Fei gritted his teeth, his Ling energy flowed furiously, the Sky River fan suddenly snapped shut and he pointed the fan gently at Xuemo, Sky River Prison. A spark of blue light came out of the fan and seemed to slowly fly toward Xuemo. A strong feeling of danger suddenly rose in Xuemo. This bit of blue light, the pressure it gave him far surpassed any of the previous moves. He didn't dare to be inattentive. His mind moved and the cold waterfall floating in the air instantly responded, leaping towards the blue light. Balls of clear fire. Inside were sword essences each as gentle as water. The rain of fire from the waterfall seemed to cover the blue light. Suddenly, Wen Fei opened the Sky River fan, and shouted, "Open!" That blue light was suddenly like a large net, aimed directly at Xuemo. Xuemo wasn't able to dodge in time and instantly was trapped. Xuemo only felt the blue light suddenly grow in front of his eyes. In the blink of an eye, waves filled his vision. His surroundings were a blur. Xuemo was very familiar with this kind of scenery. He had once practiced the sword in the river, and naturally was extremely familiar. Right now, he was in an air bubble. Who would have thought that the speck of blue light would contain such thick water energy? Those clear flames, when they entered the water, created explosions. However, there was too much water, and those little clearly water sword energies were ineffective and instead exploded on Xuemo. The pressure came in on all sides and the bubble was slowly being squeezed. Xuemo took a deep breath solemnly. This was the other's final attack. Instantly, his fighting spirit burst forward. He might not be able to compare to Wei Xingxiang, but he wasn't putty that these wastrels could manipulate as they willed. Xuemo didn't detect that after practicing the sword, he had went from the initial fear of battle to quickly not fearing battle and his desire for fighting was increasing. He was like that now. He became more excited the more he fought. Right now, especially when he saw Wen Fei's ultimate move, his fighting spirit had reached its peak. Come! He widened his eyes, shouting soundlessly inside. The waterfall which had been raging fire disappeared. The water drop sword turned into a streak of light and returned to Xuemo's hands. Seeming to have felt Xuemo's desire to fight, the body of the water drop sword vibrated, like ripples in water. The clear hum it gave made Xuemo even more excited. He closed his eyes, caressing the sword like he was caressing a lover. Without the support of the waterfall, the water which had been coming in at all sides didn't have any resistance and instantly went in. The air bubble shattered and Xuemo was swept into the water. Wen Fei couldn't disguise the joy on his face. If you were in the water, weren't you just a fish waiting for me to slice you? He shouted, up. The ball of water containing Mo slowly flew into the sky. The ball was enormous, like a small pond. Mo was the wild beast in the cage. No matter how he struggled, he wouldn't be able to break free. Wen Fei was smug inside. This prison of water, it was much more secure than one made of steel. The faces of the Wukong sword sect outer sect disciples whitened. They were terrified as they looked at the large shadow cast by the ball of water as it flew higher. Mo's figure inside the water became more indistinct and could barely be made out. To say nothing else, just being smashed from such a height, it would definitely lead to internal injury. Determination suddenly appeared on Xiaoguo's pale face. She suddenly rushed out of the crowd, heading for Wen Fei. "Little girl, what do you think you are doing?" A graceful figure blocked Xiaoguo's path. Tao Zhuer's face was cheerful as she looked at Xiaoguo. "Move aside." Xiaoguo was angry and panicked. However, her anger was like a little kitten baring its teeth and scratching, extremely adorable. Ming Dao's tense heart relaxed. Seeing Xiaoguo's innocence, his eyes instantly lit up. "This girl isn't bad. What are you called?" "Move aside." Xiaoguo was almost crying. Hints of cruelty flashed through Wen Fei's eyes. Looking at the ball of water in the air, he smirked smugly. "Have a good taste of my Sky River prison." Finishing, he reached out with his left hand, and swiped towards the ball of water. The ball of water in the sky transformed. In the water ball, an enormous hand headed for Mo. This guy had made him look so bad, Wen Fei didn't want to let him off that easily. It was very interesting to play like a cat with a mouse. The Wukong disciples couldn't help but gasp in shock, not wanting to look. Hopelessness made its way onto Xiaoguo's face. She knew she wasn't a match for the two, but a rare determination flashed through her teary eyes. Just at this time, inside the water cage, the sword pointed downwards. Mo suddenly opened his closed eyes. For some reason, he thought about the day he had comprehended Li Water Sword Essence, saw the enormous hand that was about to catch him. From the corner of his eye, he could see the figures beneath. He could imagine how smug the other person was at this time, how excited. "But, my sword scripture. It's Li Water Sword Scripture." The light exploded in Mo's eyes. It was like his eyes were suddenly void of all emotion, cold like the clear flames. His two hands grasping the water-drop sword, the slanted sword unhesitatingly made an upward slash against the current. Li Water Burning Heavens. The gigantic hand shattered. On the ground, Wen Fei's expression changed. How was it possible? How could he still counterattack in the water cage? He gritted his teeth and wanted to change his technique, but his face suddenly became empty of color. He discovered that he had completely lost control of the water cage. How was it possible? At this time, other people had detected the change in the sky and all lifted their heads. The ball of water was rapidly collapsing into itself as if there was a deep bottomless pit inside it. And when Mo's body was revealed, everyone couldn't help but inhale. In mid-air, the water cage had disappeared, leaving behind Mo's hands holding the sword. Shock was on Ming Dao and Tao Zhuer's face. They looked in disbelief at the sword in Mo's hands. Around the 3 chi long sword, a 10 chi long blade of blue flame slowly and silently burned. This blue flame was completely composed of water. Heavens, he had absorbed all of Wen Fei Shixiang's Sky River prison, and turned it into his own weapon. This world, how could there be such a fantastical thing? This guy, was he really only Zhuji level? Looking at Xiaoguo, Tao Zhuer, and Ming Dao below, Mo instantly understood what had happened. A flash of anger floated in his eyes. His two hands holding the sword, he lifted it up. The water flame on the sword was like an enormous blooming flower, soundlessly opening. Die! An angry bellow like thunder on a clear day. Containing all his anger, all his fighting spirit, all his Ling energy, Xuemo was like a flash of light as he chopped downwards. A ruler straight blue light suddenly appeared in midair, so bright one couldn't look directly at it. Below, the faces of Wen Fei and the others changed dramatically. This guy was crazy. His sword presence, it managed to wrap all three of them inside at once. At this time, the three couldn't attend to anything else. They all took out their final defenses. A water curtain appeared around Wen Fei, even thicker than last time. The peach blossom Ling armor on Tao Zhuer's body glowed brightly, peach blossoms flying in the air and shielding her inside. Ming Dao angrily took out a copper bell. The bell grew as it came into the open, firmly covering Ming Dao inside. At this time, Xuemo forgot everything. In his eyes, there was only the three people below. He was doing one thing only. That was, channeling Ling energy, furiously, insanely pushing out Ling energy. The straight and cold light landed from the sky with a strong and fierce presence, heavily smashing the three from above. The most commonly used sword attacks were stab and slice. Even chopping was rarely used. And people could never have thought that a sword could be used to smash. What Xuemo used was a smash. Like what he had raised wasn't a flying sword but a heavy hammer. Boom! The blue light flashed and swallowed the three people on the ground. After the ear-shattering explosion was a deathly silence. Xuemo's legs weakened and he sat down on the ground, panting for his life. Li Water Burning Heavens was too strong for him. After he completed it he basically had no offensive power left. However, he gritted his teeth as he used the water drop sword to stand up. Looking at the deep pit over 30 feet deep, he only had one word: great. In the large hole, Wen Fei and the others were unconscious from the explosion. Wen Fei's clothing was in tatters. The Ling armor on Tao Zhuer's body was almost shattered and Ming Dao's copper bell had broken into countless pieces. Xuemo sighed. The terrifying power of this, Li Water Burning Heaven, had to be credited to Wen Fei's water cage. If there hadn't been so much water, it definitely wouldn't reach such a terrifying result. If countless liters of water were dropped, this was already very scary. It was time to take his spoils. Xuemo instantly became excited, completely disregarding any kind of manners. He was like a cat that smelt food, limping as he skipped towards the deep hole. Yan Mingzi and Hu Shan were so frightened dumb that they forgot to stop him. They were really rich. Xuemo sighed inside. He wasn't easygoing at all. He took a water blue ring from Wen Fei's hands. In reality, the best thing on his body was the Sky River fan. However, what Xuemo cultivated was the flying sword. This Sky River fan was good, but it wasn't suited to him. This ring wasn't normal. It definitely was the finest of the third grade. It could increase the ability to control water. However, he still needed to experiment to find the specific effects. He took a 1000-year peach wood hairpin from Tao Zhuer's head. Slurp slurp. There were 3 formations on it. Evil removing, nourishing, focus. Good things, good things. From Ming Dao's body, Xuemo wasn't courteous in taking off the other's pair of boots. 3rd grade wind passing boots. Xuemo was very knowledgeable. There were wind travel and movement formations on the boots and were very practical. Vicious. Yan Mingzi looked at the 3 things that Xuemo picked. He couldn't help but inhale. He both heard and admired it. Hu Shan was like a statue. When he saw Xuemo's wolf-like and greedy gaze, he couldn't help but shudder. At this moment, he decided he didn't want the jade pendant anymore. Chapter 88, The Scalping Zombie. Everyone was dumbstruck where they stood, their minds blank. To say nothing of victory and defeat, but what the people had expected was fierce combat, exchanging blows back and forth, a tense situation, and end with a barely achieved victory. The result was 3 people were defeated by a single move. This result made everyone's jaws drop to the ground. Even the Wukong sword sect disciples who had been full of confidence in Zuomo had lost their ability to speak. Xiao Guo stared dazedly at Zuomo. How Xixiang looked when he had been plundering from their bodies. Oh, why would she have used plundering? No, Xixiang was appropriating his spoils. Xiao Guo unconsciously defended Xixiang. For you, Zuomo threw the 1,000-year peachwood hairpin that he took from Tao Zhuer's head to Xiao Guo. Xiao Guo instinctively caught it. Inhales suddenly sounded among the female disciples. Their eyes suddenly became red as they looked at the peachwood hairpin on Xiao Guo's hands. They were like a herd of rabbits locked onto one single carrot. It's a pity that her Ling armor is shattered. Otherwise, removing it to give to you would be nice. Zuomo muttered regretfully. He completely hadn't thought about just how inappropriate it was to take off a female Xiaoju's armor in public. A moment later, Xiao Guo refocused. Looking at the peachwood hairpin on her hand shook as though it had shocked her and almost threw it away. Xixiang, this is too valuable. She might not recognize how good this peachwood hairpin was, but holding it in her hands, she could feel the extraordinariness of it. This peachwood hairpin, it was too valuable. This kind of thing, Xixiang should keep it for himself. She thought. Zuomo's eyes scanned the unconscious 3 people, impatiently saying, just take it and stop nagging. What Xiao Guo was most afraid of was Zuomo's impatience. She instantly became timid and afraid of speaking. Zuomo strongly controlled his impulse to plunder everything from the 3 people that were unconscious. He turned his face to look at Yan Mingzi and Hu Shan. Do you guys want to fight again? That voice, it was as warm as the wolf grandmother. Yan Mingzi and Hu Shan both shuddered, their heads shaking like a rattledrum. Really, neither of you wants to fight? The 2 then nodded quickly like a chicken eating rice, their hands over their chests and their feet unconsciously moved back 2 paces. In their eyes, Zuomo had completely transformed into the most terrifying demon. Such a disappointment, when Zuomo expressionlessly said this sentence, his words were full of regret. Yan Mingzi and Hu Shan's hearts couldn't help but jump furiously. Zuomo waved his hand, take them away. Do not bother me in the future. It was like they had been pardoned from death. Exchanging a look, the 2 hurriedly picked up the 3 who were unconscious and ran away. They looked like they hated that their parents didn't give birth to them with 2 more legs. After their figures disappeared, Zuomo couldn't hold up any longer and crashed to the ground. Seeing the situation, Xiao Guo instantly was shocked and ran over to ask in panic, Xixiang, are you wounded? Seeing the apple face full of concern, Zuomo's heart warmed. Oh, nothing. Just a bit tired. Zuomo waved his hand, pretending it was nothing. He then took out a dan from his bosom, and shoved it into his mouth. Folding his legs, he started to meditate. Yan Mingzi and Hu Shan only stopped when they couldn't see Wukong Mountain anymore. The 2 panted. Is that guy even human? Yan Mingzi said breathlessly, the difference here with our information is too big. Lucky that we ran fast enough. Hu Shan's face was relieved. Yan Mingzi still had lingering fears, exactly. Didn't you see his eyes as he looked at us? He wanted to strip us bare. The 2 couldn't help but think of Zuomo's eyes. As though they didn't wear clothing on a snowy day, they shivered again and said at the same time, so scary. After a while, the 2 gradually walked out from Zuomo's shadow. Yan Mingzi pointed at the 3 unconscious people, what to do with them. Hu Shan thought about how he would have to carry them to the sect and gritted his teeth, wake them up. After a while, 3 extremely tragic howls passed out. Zuomo, I will never forgive you. Return my shoes, this girl will kill you. Zuomo was extremely smug. He had completely changed his attire. His hand held the water drop sword, the streaming fire Ling gathering pendant at his waist, a black-blue water ring on his finger, and on his feet were the wind travel boots. Extremely dandyish. This new set of attire, even Su Xia, who was famous for the wealth of her family in the sect, was gaping when she saw it. She wondered inside, did Zhuo Mo shitty rob a talisman shop? While smug, he still had to live out his days. Zhuo Mo needed to spend time caring for the Ling garden that he rented. Other than that, he couldn't stop his daily cultivation. His days were very full. However, Zhuo Mo was very disappointed that for the next few days, no one came up to challenge him. These days nothing was as fast as plundering, not even Ling farming or dan making. This was a no investment, great profit, a sleight of hand. Zhuo Mo was regretful. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have beaten all of them into unconsciousness that day. A small continuous flow was the best. He was unaware that, due to his strong performance, all of Ling Ying's sect had been shocked. Especially his demeanor when he had been receiving his trophies. Under the effort of Yan Mingzi and Hu Shan's storytelling, it reached all of Ling Ying's sect. The nickname of the Scalping Zombie was created. The Scalping Zombie was undoubtedly the opponent that the wastrels didn't want to touch the most. Wastrels usually relied on expensive talismans and countless jinxure to battle. However, if they went to provoke the Scalping Zombie, wasn't it giving money to the other? If they took great talismans, and they lost, then it would be hard to keep possession of the talisman. According to the detailed description from the talisman expert Yan Mingzi and the comparison to the talismans the 5 people had lost, it proved that the Scalping Zombie's eyes were extremely experienced. If they lost, what they would lose was definitely the most valuable and expensive talisman they had. But if they wore only trash to go make a challenge, the already low chance of winning would head towards 0. The wastrels of Ling Ying's sect were all smart and perceptive. No one dared to go provoke this Scalping Zombie. The elders of Wukong's sword sect were all absent. Zhuo Mo had an extremely enjoyable life. Especially because no one cared about him making dan. He would make a batch of golden crow pills every day. This was a very steady source of income. However, he didn't want to spend too much effort on it. Golden crow pills might be profitable, but it was still a first-grade Ling Dan, and the profits were limited. Zhuo Mo's eyes had been spoiled by the fine talismans on his body. If he only relied on making golden crow pills, he would need at least half a year to be able to buy just any of the talismans he was wearing right now. The price of normal third-grade talismans were not expensive and Zhuo Mo could afford it. However, for the fine specimens like this one, the price would reach an incredible height. Zhuo Mo once again took up his previous experiment to use the essence of the sun as the primary in the Li fire seal formation as the auxiliary fire, to make a new kind of Lingdan. Taking up this eternally failing experiment wasn't completely for Jingxia. He was going for a golden crow fire. Golden crow fire was a 4th-grade fire seed. If he had it, the low-grade Lingdan he made would automatically increase a level. Also, Golden Crow Fire was one of the originators of all the fires in the world. It could merge with many other fire seeds. In the future, if he encountered better fire sources, he could merge it into the other fire. Of course, for Zhuo Mo at this time, Golden Crow Fire was already the best fire in the world. Even more, there was a possibility he could achieve Golden Crow Fire through his own power. What would fill him more full of energy and fighting spirit other than this? He burrowed into Master's Records room and started to research for Ling grasses that could endure the essence of the sun and other dominant forces. Just as Zhuo Mo prepared to focus and enter seclusion, the pink paper crane landed from the sky. "Yi, what's the answer from last time's game?" Zhuo Mo hit his head, and wailed misfortune. These days, he had been enchanted in dan-making and threw that so-called game into the back of his head. Without any other way, he could only harden his head and reply, "Apologies, I was busy these days. He doesn't place importance on me. I'm very hurt." Zhuo Mo felt his head swell. Threat. This definitely was a threat. How about another 2 days? Xuemo decided that in these 2 days, even if he had to not eat or sleep, he would definitely solve this game. He knew just how ruthless and vicious this paper crane girl was. However, he once again underestimated the paper crane girl's ruthlessness and viciousness. Just as Xuemo warily unfolded the pink paper crane that just flew over, he felt his eyes blur and the surroundings instantly changed. Damned woman! Xuemo swore angrily. It wasn't the first time that he encountered such a situation. It also wasn't the first time the damned woman used this trick. Ye don't scold me. Who made it that you didn't put importance on me? Ye doesn't want to play with me, I just have to find ways to amuse myself. This is a maze that I learned when I was 7. It's very fun. Ye, slowly enjoy it. A sweet to the bones voice came out of the air, carrying a hint of laziness and indifference. Damned woman! Xuemo forced the words through his teeth. If the other was in front of him, he would definitely leap over and use the water drop sword to chop her into mulch. This damned uncaring, bored, and inane woman. His swearing didn't receive any reply. Xuemo slowly calmed down from the anger burning inside. Maze? He scanned the surroundings. Strangely, he was slightly panicked. Under his feet was a checkerboard. Each square was 1 foot squared, either black or white, alternating as it spread to the edge of the horizon. Illusion, this was an illusion. Xuemo told himself. If the other said that this was a maze formation, then it was certainly an illusion. However, all of this seemed so real. Xuemo could even feel the hardness of the tiles under his feet. It was completely empty. Xuemo seemed to be standing in the middle of nowhere, alone and without aid. Luckily, there wasn't anything dangerous. Xuemo was slightly comforted. He started to ponder how he would walk out of this maze formation. The formations that he knew were pitifully few, and the maze formation in front of him clearly wasn't one of those. A maze formation that damned woman knew at 7 years old. Xuemo started to grit his teeth again. Suddenly, a ball of mist floated out of nowhere. But the mist came quickly and left quickly. However, when the mist faded, Xuemo was dumbstruck as he looked at the scene in front of him. Chapter 89, Silly Yao. The mist faded and a hot spring had appeared. In the steam that rose up, a crowd of beautiful women who were bathing could be barely made out. Their eyes were alluring and extremely seductive. The smooth and silky skin seemed to have magnetism, securely holding Xuemo's eyes. The beauties played and laughed, disregarding Xuemo as empty air. When had the pitiful Xuemo ever seen something like this? It was like he had been struck by lightning, dumbstruck. The laughter and breathing of the women burrowed into his ear. He felt his throat was dry, his entire body hot. Something inside his body seemed to be moving. What spell was this? Xuemo felt his heart beat faster and faster until it felt like his heart was going to jump out of his chest, uncontrollably beating. He used all the energy in his body to struggle to swallow. He detected that his entire body wasn't normal, definitely not normal. He started to channel Ling power. It didn't have an effect. He couldn't help but be shocked. Such a strong spell. Such a strong maze formation. Calm. Calm. It was fake. Fake. Xuemo told himself. At this time, he should close his eyes, but for some reason, his eyelids today didn't listen to him. It seemed that there was a mysterious world in that hot spring that uncontrollably attracted his eyes. If he didn't restrain himself forcefully, his legs would unconsciously walk towards the hot spring. Tracelessly capturing a person's mind and soul. Imperceptibly controlling a person's body. Xuemo's last bit of rationality concluded, this group of beauties were in reality a high-grade maze formation. 4th grade or even 5th grade. The person trapped would feel hot, the rhythm of breathing lost, the mind disturbed, Ling power channeling would be obstructed. He reflexively swallowed again. Suddenly, Zhuo Mo's pupils expanded. The hot steam suddenly disappeared. Those beautiful women, without an exception, their heart-startling faces, their amazing bodies, the porcelain skin and a blow like no other before attacked Zhuo Mo like a stream of lightning. His breathing stopped, his heart stopped at this moment as well. Was this the final attack? All the beauties suddenly stopped moving like they were under a paralyzing spell. After that, with speed visible to the naked eye, they started to age and wither. The healthy and alluring skin lost the glow, the tightness, became wrinkled like the bark of a tree. Their beautiful appearance quickly withered and lost vitality. The skin turned bad, rotted and revealed the white bones inside. In the flick of a finger, a crowd of beautiful women became a crowd of skeletons. His chest heaving, Zhuo Mo felt like he had ate countless mosquitoes and wanted to throw up. This reversal of events, all the blood in his body seemed to reverse flow and he almost spat out blood. The viciousness of this final attack. Zhuo Mo was extremely shocked. The person who created this maze formation was really strong. He hadn't felt even a bit of Ling power. This was a traceless attack. At this time, a tearing sound occurred next to his ear. The scene in front of him suddenly twisted as though it was being sucked away by something. Beautiful women, skeleton, the black and white checkerboard, it completely disappeared. He saw Pu Yao opening his mouth and a wisp of smoke was sucked inside. His state seemed comfortable and satisfied. When did Pu Yao recover? Did he just ruin the maze formation right now? Pu Yao closed his mouth and turned to look at Zhuo Mo, lightly throwing down, "You have a nosebleed." Zhuo Mo dazed and hurried to touch his nose. As expected, it was red. Ha 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 ha, Pu Yao laughed carefree, his face mischievous as he looked at Zhuo Mo. Zhuo Mo didn't understand at all. Bleeding proved that the other's maze formation was really too strong. He had actually been wounded and bled without him noticing. But why was Pu Yao laughing? He felt that Pu Yao's laugh was slightly strange. Even now, his chest felt unspeakably uncomfortable. The last ultimate attack, the power was too amazing. The feeling of disgust lingered in his heart. Barely managing to calm down, Pu Yao glanced at Zhuo Mo and started snickering again. He swept across the pink-colored paper on Zhuo Mo's hands and snatched it over, shoving it into his mouth. He chewed 2 times and swallowed it down. For the second time, he had a satisfied expression. You eat paper?" Zhuo Mo pointed at Pu Yao, face full of disbelief as he asked. Such pure energy, it would be a pity to waste it. Pu Yao thrust out a blood-red tongue and licked his lips, still hungering. "When did you wake up?" Zhuo Mo asked dumbly. "When this maze formation started." Pu Yao snickered. However, Zhuo Mo felt that the other's eyes as they looked at him were slightly weird. "You've recovered?" Zhuo Mo still decided to have some concern for Pu Yao. "Not that easy." Pu Yao stretched and said lazily, "The injury this time was too much. Recovering isn't that easy." From his expression, he didn't seem to be that concerned with his injury. It seemed the situation was better than he had thought. Zhuo Mo felt slightly safer. He thought about the beautiful women he had just seen. He hurriedly asked, "What maze formation was it just now?" "Too strong. I was injured without me noticing." Ha 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 ha, Pu Yao couldn't resist and started howling with laughter again, holding his stomach. Laughing to the point of not being able to stand up. Zhuo Mo's face was puzzled. He didn't know why Pu Yao was responding like this. This maze formation really was powerful. At a place far away from Sky Moon Jia. Why hasn't there been a response? Is he really not tempted by beauty? Has he surrendered? A girl propped up her chin and talked to herself. A while later. Still nothing. Her face was suspicious. There's no reason. As long as he isn't a playboy, he shouldn't be able to resist. Is he really experienced? He didn't seem like it. Did I look wrong? This miss dislikes that kind of men the most. She completely did not know her tempting maze formation had been altered by Puyao and its effect had moved from one extreme to another extreme. She wasn't satisfied. In Little West Wind Yard. Do you understand women? Puyao asked. Of course. Suemo looked strangely at Puyao. This question was so dumb and idiotic. Had Puyao's mind been wounded? His mind was now unclear. He reminded in goodwill, Li Ying Feng Shiji, Xiaoguo, master. They are all women. No. No. Puyao had previously been an old antique of 3,000 years ago but, at least, he had been somewhat normal. But now, his mind had been wounded and become dumb. Suemo looked slightly sympathetically at Puyao. So pitiful. A sky Yao becoming a dumb Yao. Meeting Suemo's gaze, Puyao snickered, have you been close with a woman? Suemo looked with even more sympathy at Puyao, I'm close to all of them. Puyao's snickers suddenly stopped, like he had choked. He suddenly found that it was very difficult to explain this matter to Suemo. When you see them, do you have any strange thoughts in your head? Puyao made a last effort. Strange thoughts. Suemo struggled, and then nodded, I have. So you really do have some thoughts. Puyao became excited. He continued in leading, what thoughts? Selling medicine. Suemo bashfully and obediently answered. Puyao was dumbstruck. Suemo counted on his fingers as he said, but it's a pity that Xiaoguo is still too poor right now. Master, she won't buy the dan that I make. Usually, only Li Ying Feng Shiji would buy. However, Su Qing Shiji also would buy. Oh, after some more time, I would advertise moisture dan to them. And there must also be Su Yi Xia Shiji. Oh, how Min might be lacking, but I won't say no to Jingshi. In the future, I will make lots and lots of dan. Elder Wei Nan's jade scrolls said that women are the best people to sell to. Puyao sprayed out blood and collapsed. After a while, his limbs twitched and he struggled up. He said, refusing to give up, didn't you just see those naked women? Didn't you feel something? If before, Suemo had been using a look reserved for silly Yao, then now Suemo's gaze as he looked at Puyao was like if he was looking at an idiot. Full of pity, he said, Puyao, that's the seal formation. Gurgle gurgle. Puyao once again fell down, fresh blood furiously flowing out from his mouth like a spring. So pitiful. Suemo looked sympathetically at Puyao who had been heavily affected. However, Suemo quickly didn't have the time to sympathize with Puyao. The sect leader and the others all returned to the mountain. When Suemo saw the deep exhaustion in the expression of the elders, he perceptively didn't say anything. The sect leader didn't say any words, only waved his hands to signal for the disciples to leave. This time, the incident really is too big. Pei Yuanran sighed deeply, Sky Moon Jia would not be peaceful. The others were silent. Yan Li's face was worried, we have to take precautions. Wei Xing's talents are so outstanding, 1 in 100 years. We need to think of ways for him to reach Jindan early, otherwise, everyone understood the rest. A genius, no matter the talent, before they matured, they were all very fragile. Killing an exceptional Zhuji Xiuzhe only required an average Ningmai. They only needed a seal, a talisman. Oh, I wanted Wei Xing to have a strong foundation. Looking at it now, time doesn't wait for me. Pei Yuanran gave a deep sigh. He thought for a moment and said resolutely, in abnormal times, we have to act abnormally. Everyone, gather all your power to help Wei Xing. Xin Yan and Yan Lu nodded at the same time. Shi Feng Rong hesitated for a second and said, what about Suemo? Pei Yuan Ran said helplessly, Zhuo Mo's talent might be outstanding. In another sect, they naturally would take care and nurture. But our assets, Shimmy, you know it as well. If we need to put all our energy into nurturing, we could barely just nurture Wei Sheng. Yes. Shimmy, I only have that much in my stores. I don't even know if there is enough for just Wei Sheng. Yan Lu urged. Shifeng Rong knew that what the Shixiang said was the truth. Wukong sword sect wasn't some large sect and didn't have much wealth. How were young experts made? Made from countless Jingshi and Lingdan. Wei Sheng was the undisputed successor of the sect. Shifeng Rong knew very well. However, Zhuo Mo was her disciple. She gritted her teeth, I do not have objections on nurturing Wei Sheng. But since Zhuo Mo won't have a share of the resources, then we should reimburse him in other areas. If I need to make Dan for Wei Sheng, in the future, I won't have time to teach him and will have to leave him to his own devices. Speaking of it, she was slightly sorrowful and then raised her head, I only have a request. Other than some special jade scrolls, all the jade scrolls in the sect should be open for him. This, Pei Yuan Ran was slightly hesitant. Shifeng Rong's request was against the sect's rules. But when he saw the determination on Shifeng Rong's face, he still nodded, yes, I agree. Nurturing Wei Sheng. The most important part was the supply of Lingdan. On this point, Shifeng Rong was extremely important. Pei Yuan Ran was a charismatic person. He thought and then stood, since the situation is this bad, the jade scrolls would be garbage if they are in the pavilion. From today onwards, all the jade scrolls in the sect will be open to all inner sect disciples. And then the whole of Wukong sword sect shook. Chapter 90, Pu Yao's counterattack from any angle. Zhuo Mo wasn't a slow person. Of course, Pu Yao might have his own opinions about this point. The changes in the sect allowed Zhuo Mo to smell a strange flavor. Master had sternly told him to work hard and not slack off. She also said the jade scrolls in the sect, including all the scrolls in Fragrant Ginger Yard, were all open to him and he did not need to spend a single contribution point. A benefit that Zhuo Mo could have only dreamed about in the past was placed in front of him, but he wasn't happy at all. The sect leader and the other Shibwa had announced these measures immediately after coming back. This meant that something had definitely happened or was going to happen. After the experiences of these 2 years, he knew this very well, spells were Jingshi. No matter which sect or organization, they wouldn't freely pass spells to people. In the past, it was normal that the sect required contribution points for spells. Contribution points were effectively Jingshi. But the sect leader suddenly said that spells didn't need contribution points anymore. This clearly meant there was a problem. Something was going to happen. Zhuo Mo felt out the situation by asking if he needed to go train his body under Xin Yen Shibwa. Master's answer once again proved his guess. He didn't need to go. Xin Yen Shibwa was going into seclusion to forge. After that, Master told him that she was going into seclusion to make Dan and didn't have time to teach him, so he needed to study hard on his own. The conversation between him and Master lasted for a whole 4 hours. How to study and everything else, as though she needed to make everything clear. The bad feelings Zhuo Mo felt became even heavier. In the end, Master had hesitated and urged him to spend more time practicing the sword. It was fine if he was slowing in Dan making. If, at this time, Zhuo Mo still didn't know that there was a problem, then he was truly an idiot. Master waved her hand to send him away. When he had stepped outside the door to the Dan room, the weak sigh that Master had given, Zhuo Mo had heard it extremely clearly. Returning to the West Wind Yard, Zhuo Mo's mood wasn't good, as though he was suffocating. This day, he didn't cultivate. At night, lying on the roof, his head pillowed on his arms, he looked at the stars in the sky in a daze. The sound tablet by his side quietly broadcasted all kinds of news. What are you worried about? Pu Yao had come out at some unknown time. I feel that something is going to happen. Suemo said as he looked at the stars. Something is going to happen. 2 years ago when I opened my eyes, all I thought of was surviving in the sect. At that time, I didn't have any ideas and never thought about the future. I got used to staying here, used to this mountain. Master was very good to me, even though her temper might not be good. And Wei Xing Shi Xiang, Old Black, Liang Feng Shiji, Xiaogua, even if something is going to happen, you can't do anything about it. Pu Yao said unconcernedly. I know. Suomo's eyes were slightly dark, my power is so weak. If something was really going to happen, I can't help. Then isn't that all? Pu Yao asked strangely. But I don't want, gazing at the faraway stars, Suemo lightly muttered. Pu Yao became silent. He seemed to have remembered something. The second day, early in the morning, Suemo ran to the rented Ling garden and did a round of maintenance. He was just preparing to leave when someone came searching for him. Could you be Mr. Sua, Ling plant farmer Suemo? The person asked politely, his face intelligent. Suemo was slightly surprised, that's me. This one has long heard of your name. A hint of joy came across the person's face but he still showed extreme control, this one is Hirong and has a little shop. I heard that Mr. Suemo has planted a lot of fiery red flower. This one came to ask if Mr. Suemo is willing to sell. Suemo nodded, I did plant a lot of fiery red flower. However, there's still some time until they mature. Hirong smiled and said, this one wants to reserve it first. Oh. What kind of reserve? Suemo hadn't thought that the market had such high demand. His fiery red flowers hadn't matured and there were actually people that were coming up to reserve them. Since he had planted this batch of fiery red flowers to sell, it was naturally better that people were finding him. How much has Mr. Suemo planted? Hirong asked. 80 mu. Hirong mused for a beat and then said, right now, the market price of fiery red flower is about 2 pieces of third-grade jingsha per tael. How much does Mr. Suemo think the harvest will be? About 20 caddies. Suemo gave a conservative number. As expected of a Ling plant farmer, the yield is astonishing. Hirong praised. He then followed up, I'm willing to first give 60 pieces of third-grade jingsha as a down payment. If the market price in the future is lower than 2 pieces of third-grade jingsha per tael, I will buy at this price and add the remainder. If it is higher than this price, then I will pay according to the market price. What does Mr. Sua think? This price was already very good. Suemo thought for a second before nodding, good. He suddenly asked, what's the price of second-grade fiery red flower? His Ling fields would produce some second-grade fiery red flower but there wouldn't be too much. 50 pieces of third-grade jingsha per tael. Hirong was slightly shocked. When he thought about the fact the other was a Ling plant farmer, he then added, if there is second-grade fiery red flower, this one is willing to take as much as there is. Suemo then asked about the market for all kinds of herbs and medicines. Hirong was clearly experienced. He could almost unhesitatingly report the prices of all herbs. After that, the two created an agreement and exchanged imprints. The imprints, it was to leave behind one spiritual imprint on a blank jade scroll. This way, it was easier for the two to communicate. With imprints, the paper cranes could easily find the other for convenient communication. Suemo could not do flying sword messages. He could only use paper cranes. Previously, other than the pink paper crane woman, Suemo basically never used paper cranes. Paper cranes cost money. In the past, with his situation, he wouldn't bear it. 60 pieces of third-grade jingsha, for Suemo, it was a gigantic sum of money. Maybe he should buy a suit of Ling armor. The Ling armor he was wearing now was the second-grade Ling armor that Yan Lushibwa had given him. It really didn't match with the fine third-grade talismans such as Water Drop Sword. However, he only thought about it. It was naturally possible to buy a third-grade Ling armor with 60 pieces of third-grade Jingxia, but what that amount could buy was normal third-grade Ling armor. It wasn't enough for the finest armors. After thinking, he decided to temporarily not spend the Jingxia. He remembered his body still contained the great consumer of Jingxia, Pu Yao. As expected, when he returned to Little West Wind Yard, Pu Yao came out. "I want the Jingxia, say, what do you want to exchange it for?" Pu Yao's words were very proud, but he then reminded Zhuo Mo, however, this little bit of Jingxia, you won't get much of a good thing in return. "What can I exchange it for?" Zhuo Mo wasn't dumb and tested the waters. Even though Pu Yao's intelligence was a bit low right now, but this person's history was marked. He had forced through a lot of transactions. I hadn't thought that you would have learnt. Pu Yen scanned Zhuo Mo a few times and then smiled cunningly, but this is better, a fair business transaction. Just 60 pieces of third-grade Jingxia, what you can exchange for is a little trick using the consciousness. How about it? Or you can first make a payment, learn a section, then pay to learn another section. It's better to pay all at the same time. Zhuo Mo understood Pu Yao's character very well. If it was making regular payments, this guy would raise the price sky high. If he was stuck in the middle, he would definitely be in trouble. He. Up to you. How about it? Do you want to learn this little trick? Pu Yao smiled darkly, the blood eye was like it was looking at prey. Zhuo Mo felt his hairs stand up. Zhuo Mo gritted his teeth, learn. He had kept on practicing, embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation, and his consciousness far surpassed the average person. However, he didn't know how to use it. His only use of his consciousness was when he was monitoring the Ling Dan during Dan making. Ha. Chapter 91, Merging Sword Essences. When Pu Yao saw Zhuo Mo, he smiled. "Pu Yao, I don't want this garbage scripture. Either you return the Jingxia, or exchange it for another scripture." Zhuo Mo's eyes were red, like a furious thin zombie, hatefully staring at Pu Yao. Pu Yao's light laugh was like the hiss of a snake. He slowly drawled, "There's no such thing as refunds and exchanges here. In the future, don't think about getting Jingxia." Zhuo Mo hatefully said. Pu Yao wasn't affected. He propped up his chin, his peerlessly beautiful face full of mockery, relaxed and carefree. "I don't need your permission anyway." Hearing this, Zhuo Mo stopped breathing. Finally, he remembered that he didn't seem to have any ways of stopping this guy. He wasn't satisfied. Zhuo Mo hated so much that his teeth ached but didn't know what to do. Being shut down by Pu Yao wasn't a surprise. If he could have gotten something off Pu Yao, then it would be an amazing matter. The making of golden crow pills was stuck, the fiery red flowers in the Ling gardens hadn't matured, Zhuo Mo instantly lost all avenues of income. Especially right now when he was penniless. Without Jingxia, he couldn't do anything. Zhuo Mo could only stay in the little yard and cultivate, go to the Ling garden. Any other times, he would go to fragrant ginger yard to practice Dan making. He couldn't make golden crow pills, but the other Dan medicines were not affected. It was lucky that his reputation was now great, and since Master was in seclusion to make Dan, his tab with Su Qing could be greater. It was a pity that he couldn't find a Dan that was as easy to sell and as profitable as golden crow pill. From the accounts, he was more in debt. Su Qing wasn't concerned. This was normal. If people would earn Jingxia from the moment they started learning Dan making, then everyone would be learning Dan making. Zhuo Mo remembered what Master had said to him, spend more time practicing the sword. This sentence, he remembered it very clearly. The meaning behind these words didn't need to be said. Okay, since he couldn't make Jingxia, then he will practice the sword. He had already reached a pretty good level with Li Water Sword Scripture, but he had reached a barrier. He didn't have any idea of how to develop it further. What he could think about now was to see if he could merge Wuxia and Xianxia's tidal sword essence and Li water sword essence together. This idea had sprouted when he had seen the sword river in his consciousness that was divided in two. However, merging two different sword essences was an extremely difficult matter. Luckily, almost all the jade scrolls in the sect were open, including Wuxia and Xianxia's Ice Dragon Sword Scripture. This time, the effect of opening the jade scrolls to the disciples wasn't large. Wei Xingxixiang was in the sword cave, Su Yi Xixiang was obsessed with forging, Gong Sun Qin Shiji was packing up to travel to her betrothed, Luo Li Xixiang was still in seclusion, Su Yi Xia and Hao Min didn't have much interest in the sword. Eldest Xixiang Qin Cheng was on a trip to manage affairs. Overall, the person most interested in these sword scripture scrolls was Suemo. What Suemo was most interested in was Ice Dragon Sword Scripture. In reality, this was the jade scroll he was most surprised about when the scrolls had been released this time. They even let this one out. The sect's strongest was Void Sword Scripture, but in Suemo's heart, Ice Dragon Scripture was the strongest sword scripture. He had never seen how powerful Void Sword Scripture was, but he had personally experienced Wuxia and Xianxia's terrifying sword essence many times and it had left a deep impression on him. To be able to see the entirety of Ice Dragon Sword Scripture, it was a matter that Suemo was overjoyed about. However, he quickly found that Ice Dragon Sword Scripture was like some of the jade scrolls in Fragrant Ginger Yard. The contents you were able to see were appropriate for the cultivation you had. If the cultivation wasn't high enough, you couldn't see the contents. This was to stop people who didn't have the cultivation but forced themselves to practice from damaging themselves. Suemo couldn't see much of the contents, just the impression method of the flying sword and some of the shallower contents. Seeing this, he couldn't help but sigh. Water Drop Sword might be much higher in grade than Ice Crystal Sword, but it wasn't as suited as Ice Crystal Sword for practicing Ice Dragon Sword Scripture. This firms Suemo's determination to merge the two sword essence. If for nothing else, it was worth it just for the Water Drop Sword. The language of Ice Dragon Sword was extremely profound and cryptic. But since Suemo had a rough understanding of Ice Dragon Sword essence, using it as a reference, he was actually able to understand the majority of the contents. After reading what was available to him, Suemo put down the scroll and fell into contemplation. This deep contemplation of his was 10 days long. He did not eat, drink, nor sleep, and did not rest for 10 days. On the 10th day, Suemo suddenly opened his eyes and raised his hand to form a sword energy. Poof! A streak of cool yet fiery light, containing the sharpness of a sword, hit the ground. It left behind a deep hole. On the edges of the hole, there were many traces of ice. It was a pity he could only force the two together like this. There were still many places in the new sword essence that Suemo felt were very vague. It could only wait until Suemo had a deeper understanding of Ice Dragon Sword Scripture and continuous battle for comprehension before he would become familiar. The new sword essence was with the Li Water Sword Essence as the primary and the Ice Dragon Sword Essence as the auxiliary. Originally, Ice Dragon Sword Essence was of higher grade than Li Water Sword Essence and it should have been Ice Dragon Sword Essence as primary and Li Water Sword Essence as auxiliary. But Suemo's understanding of Li Water Sword Essences was far deeper than his understanding of Ice Dragon Sword Essence. After the two were merged, the power of the sword energy increased dramatically. In comparison, the merging of sword moves was much easier than merging sword essences. No matter if it was Ice Dragon Sword Scripture or Li Water Sword Scripture, they didn't have complex or long moves. It was a pity no one came for him to test his sword with. Suemo suddenly started to miss those people from Lingying's sect. If, once in a while, someone came for him to test his sword with, and also came with a fine talisman, how great would that be? When Suemo found out that his thinking had took 10 days, he instantly jumped. Uncaring of anything else, he rode the gray-beaked goose towards the Ling garden. What he could celebrate was that the state of the fiery red flower and the other herbs in the Ling garden were very good and there wasn't much change. He could finally release a breath. Extremely tired, he simply laid down on the grass in the Ling garden and fell asleep. Dong Fu had recovered from the previous chaotic situation. This place had once again become a gathering ground for low-level shouja. Without those high-level shouja, the pressure that had been in the hearts of the low-level shouja instantly was swept away. The city became lively once again. Did you hear? The Dong Fu Sword Test Conference is going to begin. I heard. You can go as long as you are Zhuji. The qualification is really low this time. Dong Fu Hall has really put in a lot of resources this time. So many prizes, they are really generous. Che, so what? In the end, it would be you by who gets it. Just moving from the left pocket to the right. That's not so certain. Didn't Wukong Sword Sect have a genius called Wei Sheng? I feel he could be a dark horse. Wei Sheng. I also heard about him. Supposedly, Wukong Sword Sect also has a guy called the Scalping Zombie, extremely vicious. Who isn't vicious? It's only us that aren't vicious. You Bai, Zhong Ming Yan, they are all vicious. That's so true. The news that the time for the Dong Fu Sword Test Conference was quickly approaching became the hottest topic in Dong Fu. The number and quality of prizes offered this time was enough to make everyone gape. No one understood what was going on in Tian Song Zi's head that he would pay such a great price to hold a sword test conference. 4th grade Green Pine Sword, 4th grade 100 Desolation Lucky Beast Belt, 4th grade Fragmented Gold Coronet, 3rd grade Rowan Sleeve, 3rd grade Sky Shirt, 3rd grade Icy Cobra Ling Armor. It had to be said that this move was extremely effective. The generous prizes greatly stirred the excitement of young shouja, especially the poor disciples of those small sections. Where would they have the jingshi to buy talismans? They all drooled as they looked at the prizes. Once the news was announced, the people who registered were numerous. Since it didn't cost anything to register, it would be stupid not to. If they were lucky, they might be able to scoop up a talisman. They wouldn't lose anything if they lost. However, they had to start from the preliminary sword test conference and go through several rounds before entering the sword test conference. The more significant sects in Dong Fu had an allotment of slots. They could directly attend the sword test conference without first going through the preliminary sword test conference. Even though the treatment was different, the attendees didn't have many angry words. The lower the level of the shouja, the more they understood the realities of the world. If the world was like this, what could they be angry about? Other than the shouja in Dong Fu's surroundings, the sword test conference this time had attracted large numbers of skilled people from the other 12 primary towns. Under the lure of a heavy reward, there would be courageous people. Due to holding a sword test conference, Dong Fu became abnormally busy. It was the second day when Zuemo woke up. The blinding sunlight woke him from a deep sleep. With his body fully rested, he became as vigorous and energetic as usual. When he returned to the little west wind yard, he went to clean out the ling fields, sorting out the ling grasses which had matured. He was planning on going to Dong Fu at some time. These ling grasses could be exchanged for some jingshi. Just like normal, he burrowed into the stone room and started to practice embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation, and Vajra Profound Sutra. 4 hours later, he opened his eyes, revealing joy. Just now, his cultivation had broken through to the 4th level of Zhuji. Different from his consciousness which had kept on stopping before reaching 3rd breath, the increase in his ling power was very quick. In a very short amount of time, he had broken through to Zhuji 4th level. This speed could be called terrifying. Of course, the ling vein had played a crucial role. If it wasn't for this ling vein, he would probably still be at the 2nd level. Based on this speed, he would quickly break through to Ningmai. By that time, he would finally have some measure of self-protection. In Sky Moon Jia, Jindan was undoubtedly the highest level of existence. The next level down was Ningmai. However, the difference in power between different Ningmai Xianxia was very big, but no matter what, if he reached Ningmai, he would finally leave behind the ranks of low-level Xianxia. If one didn't have much ambition, Ningmai Xianxia could live a pretty good life in Sky Moon Jia. The benefits and tribute a Ningmai Xianxia received wasn't on the same level as a Zhuji Xianxia. After practicing embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation, Zhua Mo started Vajra Profound Sutra. As to fragrance knowledge, he threw the scripture to one side. Studying women, it was better to study maize formations. The version of Vajra Profound Sutra Zhua Mo practiced was the gravestone version. After practicing it for a length of time, he discovered the difference between the two versions was increasingly greater. In meditation, Zhua Mo sat upright, his entire body was like a statue forged from dark gold. Suddenly, his entire body started to tremble furiously. Chapter 92, Yin Fire Bead Chapters. Zhua Mo's body shook like dice. The tendons in his forehead and shoulders were thick like earthworms, they were extremely horrifying. Pu Yao had come out at some time. Seeing Zhua Mo's state, he seemed slightly startled. Zhua Mo's body continued to tremble for almost an hour before ceasing. Zhua Mo opened his eyes and heavily exhaled. His eyes looked slightly uncertain. Just now, he felt that his body seemed to have changed slightly, but as to what had changed, he didn't know. He lowered his head to inspect himself and didn't make any discoveries. There wasn't any problems with the gravestone version of Vajra Profound Sutra, right? His heart jumped. Who taught you this? Pu Yao's voice suddenly came from behind him. Zhua Mo jumped in fright. Turning, he released a breath upon seeing it was Pu Yao. When you were wounded, it was written on the gravestone. Pu Yao didn't seem surprised. He only nodded his head, keep practicing. Zhua Mo's heart finally settled. Since Pu Yao said for him to keep practicing, then there shouldn't be a problem. Even though he had encountered great pain when breaking through one breath with embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation, but he had to admit that embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation was a good thing. Up until now, Zhua Mo hadn't found a scripture higher in level than embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation. Fragrance knowledge truly isn't suited for you. Pu Yao said something that surprised Zhua Mo enormously. He followed up, I'll teach you another way to use your consciousness. Zhua Mo stared at Pu Yao for a long beat. In the end, he couldn't resist asking, Pu Yao, are you okay? Pu Yao didn't pay attention to him, stating, you still have a dozen or so of yin beads. Your control of fire isn't bad. I'll teach you how to make yin fire beads. Pu Yao really had been wounded in the head this time. The previous Pu Yao definitely wouldn't do something like this. Zhua Mo looked sympathetically at Pu Yao. Of course, he didn't say anything. If there was something to be gained freely and he didn't take it, then he would be stupid. Pu Yao was now acting stupid, but did he have to follow in stupidity? He listened extremely carefully, afraid of missing a word. Last time, yin beads had caused a great disaster in Dongfu. However, that had also informed Zhua Mo of just how valuable yin beads were. Without a doubt, yin beads were good things. Valuable things. Something that even those Jindan experts were fighting over, how could it not be a good thing? The method of making yin fire beads wasn't complicated, but the contents were extremely lengthy. After a while, Pu Yao was impatient and threw a ball of light at Zhua Mo, letting him read the entire yin fire bead chapter by himself. To make yin fire beads, there were 3 requirements. The first was yin beads, the second was fire, and the third was spiritual power. The more pure and dense the yin bead was, the higher grade the fire was, the stronger the consciousness was, the greater the power of the yin fire bead produced. The entire chapter was completely about these 3 points. The density and formation of yin beads were related to the level of cultivation. The manipulation of spiritual power had a crucial effect during the creation of the yin-fired bead. But in the entire chapter, most of the contents were descriptions of all kinds of fire seeds and flames. In this chapter, the descriptions of fire seeds and flames were extremely detailed. It seemed to have ranked all of the fire seeds and flames that could be used to make yin-fire beads. One of them was the fire that Mo dreamed of, golden crow fire. Due to the differences in fires, the effects of the yin-fire beads made were different. All kinds of rare and strange flames broadened Mo's knowledge and amazed him. Until he finished, he was still hungry for more. He had never thought that there would be so many kinds of flame in the world. There were even many strange and relatively unknown flames in low-grade flames. This was also the most detailed and complete scripture that he had encountered up until now. He didn't know which sect the scripture came from. To be able to study fire to this depth, they were really skilled. As he thought, his heart started to itch and he now wanted to make a few yin-fire beads. According to the records in the scripture, as long as he could find a suitable fire, the yin-fire beads that he could make would be something that even Ningmai wouldn't easily meet head-on. Yin beads, this thing was really too sensitive. Even if he did make yin-fire beads, Mo wouldn't easily use them. However, if he had this as one of his hidden cards, if it was a matter of life or death, it maybe could save him. Thinking about it, Mo was even more tempted. In the sea of consciousness, Pu Yao stood in front of the gravestone, smirking. You finally couldn't bear it anymore. 3,000 years, your patience finally reached its limits. A guy who isn't willing to abide by your rules, even as old-fashioned as you actually compromised. The gravestone was silent. Pu Yao suddenly became excited, sharpness in his blood, shouting, then why weren't you willing to compromise before? The gravestone was still silent. Pu Yao closed his eyes. When he opened them, he was so calm that he seemed like another person. His alluring and handsome face had faint disdain. You're dead yet you still want to leave behind your will. When did you become this stupid? He raised his chin, coldly gazing at the gravestone. Also, how can I let you do as you please? Dead, then you shouldn't leave anything behind. Such an interesting game. The gravestone was silent as usual. Mo wiped the sweat off his face. He cut a sorry figure, his body covered in dirt and dry leaves. Wukong Mountain was situated among a vast stretch of mountains. The places that had some density of Ling energy naturally were already occupied. What was abundant was a desolate landscape. Xianxia weren't interested in lands that had no Ling energy. They also didn't have any use for normal lumber. Other than Yao beasts, normal wild beasts were just a lump of meat in the eyes of Xianxia. Now that every sect raised their own Ling beasts, there naturally wasn't anyone who hunted these animals. The woods that were lacking in Ling energy, no one usually cared for them. Mo was in a poor backwater location now. It was a mountain valley, trees were growing in every direction, most of them were covered in ivy. The high mountain peak blocked the sunlight. This place never saw the sun. The air was filled with a rotting stench. It had been many years since someone had came to this mountain valley. The leaves covering the ground were extremely thick. This kind of place was a breeding ground for miasma, but Mo had prepared and made some first-grade detoxification dam. Over the last few days, he had been making his way through this vast forest. Right now, the elders of the sect were either out on errands or in seclusion. No one was looking over him. He was free and unrestrained. After he had seen the complete method to making fire beads, he had the idea of searching for a fire seed. What he wanted the most was golden crow fire. Fire bead chapter had a high opinion of golden crow fire. The fire bead that was created with golden crow fire would be extremely young and extremely masculine, astoundingly powerful. But in the short term, he could only think about golden crow fire. Before he could find a substitute herb, he couldn't do anything. Even if he found an herb that could work as a substitute, he wasn't very confident that it was possible. It was better that he would first find a low-grade fire seed. Anything would be better than the streaming fire seal formation in the Dan cauldron. If he had a fire seed, he could naturally form flames and create some fire beads. There were many low-grade fire seeds that were introduced in the fire bead chapter. Mo was extremely motivated. However, any place that could form fire seeds, it must be a place with plentiful Ling energy. If this was in the past, he definitely wouldn't have any way. But now, he had a 4th-grade black gold worm. Even though this method seemed stupid, but Mo felt it was very plausible. He was full of confidence in this black gold worm. It could even find a place as hidden as the rock room. If there really was a Ling vein, it definitely could find it. But his luck wasn't that good. He specially picked backwater places. After searching in the mountains for a week, he still hadn't discovered anything. Each day, he would start as soon as the sun rose. Occasionally, he would be harassed by animals, yet his hands were empty. It would be a lie to say he wasn't demotivated. But when he thought of Wei Xingxixiang, Mo felt that this little bit of trouble really wasn't anything. He relaxed even more when he thought about it. If it could be easily felt, then he wouldn't have a chance at it. Looking at the surrounding geography, he decided to try. Taking down a bamboo cylinder slightly thicker than a thumb from his waist, he uncorked it and cast a spell. The black gold worm climbed out of the cylinder, its antenna nimbly moving, and then started crawling deeper into a mountain valley. Mo's mind became alert. There was something. This was the first time the black gold worm had reacted like this. He had already become suspicious that this gold-black worm had degenerated. He hurried behind the black gold worm, limping as he sprinted. The water-drop sword quickly chopped in the front. Anywhere it passed, all the branches and ivy turned to pieces and cleared out a road. Sprinting until he reached the bottom of a cliff, Mo saw a cave about half a person high. Weeds were growing over the opening. If he didn't look closely, it would be hard to find. Mo only hesitated a while before bending down and pushing in. The inside of the cave was actually large and vast. The cold wind blew Mo's hairs on end. He scanned the surroundings. Entering his eyes was stalactites and stalagmites that had formed over thousands of years. The drip-drop of water was abnormally clear in the quiet cave. Mo quickly found the black gold worm. It had stopped over a nondescript stalagmite. Compared to those wondrously shaped stalagmites, this stalagmite was only half a person tall, and didn't have anything that could attract a person's eye. Mo suddenly remembered a part of the fire bead chapter, and instantly became excited. He slowly inhaled, calming down his excitement before walking towards the stalagmite. Under his control, the black gold worm reluctantly climbed down the stalagmite and moved to the side. Mo raised the water-drop sword, and following the top of the stalagmite, gently stabbed in. The water-drop sword easily entered. Mo suddenly had a joyous expression. Raising the water-drop sword, a milky white flame suddenly shot out of the cut. 2nd grade rare fire seed, stalagmite fire. Greedily looking at this quietly burning milky white flame, Mo restrained the excitement and joy inside. Gathering Ling power on his hands, he reached towards the stalagmite fire. The spells to gather fire seeds were detailed in Fire Bead chapter, even better than the spells Mo saw in Master's Records room. Silently channeling Ling power, his hands suddenly became attractive, and with a hiss, this stalagmite fire entered his body. His expression suddenly became even more serious. Sucking the fire seed into his body didn't mean that he could celebrate. The next step was the truly important one. Only by taming the fire seed could the fire seed be used. But even though this stalagmite fire was just 2nd grade, but it had passed through countless months, absorbed countless amounts of Ling energy, in order to form and grow to this large. How could it easily surrender? Chapter 93 Stalagmite Fire. The milky white stalagmite fire was born in the stalagmites of Yin caves, and was a kind of cold fire. Sucking it into his body, Xuemo felt a cold energy quickly spread through the channels in his body. Even though he had prepared before, his body couldn't help but shake, the Ling power almost slipping out of control. Pushing aside his surprise, he tried to control the movement of Ling power to surround this stalagmite fire. This ball of stalagmite fire was provoked, the cold energy increasing. The milky white flame gave off a strong coldness. The coldness was also extremely humid. What was even more shocking was that, in such a freezing energy, the moisture hadn't been frozen into ice, but still existed as vapor. Quickly, Xuemo felt the effect of the icy moisture. The unparalleled icy moisture, following the spitting of the flame, spread out in waves. The cold energy they contained was even more dense. Wherever they touched the channels would be damaged. They were like an extremely corrosive mist, leaving behind patches of frozen white wherever it passed. The numbness of the channels was extremely uncomfortable. Xuemo gritted his teeth, continuing to control his Ling power to suppress this stalagmite fire. The stalagmite fire was like a trapped beast, furiously fighting, the flame spitting. The freezing moisture was like the deadly energy that this white beast spat out, trying its best to damage Xuemo's channels. Xuemo felt pain inside. He could only follow the method of taming fire seeds from the Yin Fire Bead chapter, furiously channeling Ling power. The Ling power in his body suddenly changed, quickly enveloping the stalagmite fire tightly. The stalagmite fire seemed to have detected the change as it was covered by Ling power, becoming more agitated than ever, furiously fighting. Xuemo's Ling power flowed away quickly. The stronger the struggles of the stalagmite fire became, the faster the Ling power in his body would be used up. Xuemo became slightly panicked. If this speed continued, his Ling power would quickly reach the bottom. Damn it! By now, this wasn't a question of whether or not he could tame this fire, but whether or not he could keep his life. If the stalagmite fire lost the suppression from Ling power, it would start burning from inside his body until he was burnt into a pile of ice. Who would have thought assimilating a second-grade fire seed would be so difficult? This wasn't going to work. At this time, Xuemo couldn't attend to anything else. He was like a gambler that was on the precipice of death, eyes red from losing. The step behind them was the fall off a 1,000-foot-high cliff. There was no place to retreat. Since he could not retreat, then he would bet everything he had. You're just a second-grade stalagmite fire, you dare to fight with GE. You don't know what you've done. Strangely, the anger inside Xuemo suddenly erupted after he was pushed to death's door. At this time, he didn't use Yin Fire Bead chapter. In his eyes, this stalagmite fire was just a large pest that had burrowed into his body. All of his spiritual power were gathered, and he unhesitatingly cast Art of Aged Gold. Xuemo didn't have any remaining thought of taming it. He only had one thought. Kill it. A handful of golden mist transformed into a little gold sword. It was instinct after practicing the sword for so long. Without any need to think, the sword essence erupted. The robust sword essence released itself through the little sword. A golden light flashed on the little sword and it quickly melted, the golden liquid flowing and twisting. In the flick of a finger, a miniature golden water drop sword appeared inside Xuemo's body. As the golden sword took shape, the robust sword essence quickly became murderous and cold. The coldness of the stalagmite fire was like the heart-piercing cold in the deep of the cold spring, and the icy sword essence exuded by the little water drop sword was like the endless cold wind of the tundra, carrying ice, sharp as a knife. Xuemo hadn't thought that, just at this time, Art of Aged Gold suddenly broke through to the 4th level. Surrounded by Ling power, the struggling stalagmite fire suddenly stopped, motionless. Xuemo's murderous intent, carried by the sword essence, was passed on to the stalagmite fire without any hindrance. If you keep moving, I'll kill you. If this stalagmite fire still didn't listen, then the water drop sword would cut it into pieces. He was prepared to give up this stalagmite fire. For a second-grade stalagmite fire, to pay with his life, it wasn't profitable. But the next scene struck Mo dumb. The milky white stalagmite fire shrunk into a small ball, like a little kid holding his legs in a ball, shaking. This action was so like what a person could do that Mo's rage decreased slightly. So weird, these days, even fire seeds bullied the weak and were afraid of the strong. Muttering in his heart, he didn't dare let down his guard. This time, the stalagmite fire didn't stop Mo's consciousness from seeping in. What Mo didn't know was that this stalagmite fire, formed after countless years, had a basic intelligence. 2 hours later, Mo opened his eyes, giving a long exhale. He pointed out his index finger and a milky white flame suddenly rose from his finger, silently burning. Thinking about the danger that had just passed, Mo still had lingering fears. He had been yearning for a flame for a long time, but he was entirely ignorant about the process of assimilating a flame. Based on his cultivation, he would have had a difficult time taming this stalagmite fire. If he just barely tamed it, he would only end up burning himself to death. Thankfully, he had been inspired to use Art of Aged Gold and sword essence together to brutally suppress the stalagmite fire. However, Mo was completely ignorant of the fact that taming a fire seed was related to cultivation. It was really dangerous. Having made a trip to death's doors and come back, Mo wiped the sweat off his forehead. Thinking about the simple description on Fire Beat chapter, and his own dangerous encounter, he muttered, it seemed like he couldn't completely believe Fire Beat chapter. If he just followed the instructions, his little life would be gone. In the end, it was still that the things that Pu Yao gave weren't reliable. But upon further thought, he understood. Pu was a 3,000-year-old antique. The stuff he had naturally was the old things from 3,000 years ago. Those things were so old their teeth would be falling out. How could there not be a problem? Would antiques understand going with the times? Mo continued to rant, swearing at Pu Yao as though this was what he needed to comfort his wounded soul. Of course, he could only rant. He was still afraid. It was very lucky that he hadn't made Golden Crow fire before. The second-grade stalagmite fire almost took his little life. The fourth-grade Golden Crow fire, he wouldn't even be able to stop it and would just burn to ash. However, in all, Mo was still very satisfied. This stalagmite fire was a second-grade rare fire seed as ranked in Fire Beat chapter, extremely uncommon. Mo's mind suddenly shifted. Holding the water drop sword, he slowly cut away at the stone stalagmite. The inside of the stalagmite was hollow. When Mo saw a thin layer of milk-like liquid at the bottom of the stalagmite, he couldn't help but be overjoyed. This milky white liquid was called stone milk. It was an extremely rare material for dan making. He hurriedly took out a small jade bottle from his bosom and carefully gathered all of the stone milk, not leaving behind one drop. When he saw the black gold worm that was turning on its spot restlessly, he first paused before laughing. He took out 3 drops of stone milk from the jade bottle and dropped it onto the body of the black gold worm. Haha, Ge eats meat, you drink soup. As the white stone milk touched the shell of the black gold worm, it was like water touching sand, quickly being absorbed into the black gold worm. The sheen of the black gold worm's shell became even finer and shiny. The black gold worm seemed to be full, becoming motionless on the ground. Mo knew that it was absorbing the stone milk. He took out the bamboo cylinder and put it back in. Having gained the stalagmite fire and stone milk, Mo was impatient to return to Wukong Mountain. When the disciples of Wukong's sword sect saw Mo's sorry state, they were all shocked. Mo was focused on his goal, waving his hand at them, and like a burst of wind, headed straight for his own valley. Returning to the little west wind yard, Xuemo instantly started to examine the stalagmite fire. Stalagmite fire was a rare kind of second-grade fire seed, and naturally had its own unique attributes. It belonged to the ranks of cold fire. Just this, it was extremely rare in low-grade fire seeds. Other than that, because it had been born in the humid, dark and cold of the cave stalagmites, it was both full of water and cold. Its flames would naturally give out cold moisture. In other words, it combined the two opposite qualities of water and fire in one entity. This attribute, it was even more rare in low-grade fire seeds. In the five elements, water and fire opposed each other. However, in the natural world, there were many strange entities that could perfectly merge these two completely opposing attributes together. The holy water sword scripture that Xuemo practiced was to manipulate water like fire. From a certain perspective, it also contained attributes of water and fire. This was also the best and trickiest bit of the sword scripture. However, while Li water sword scripture had the qualities of water and fire, but it was far from the wonders of something natural like the stalagmite fire. Manipulate water like fire. It was still water in the end. It just borrowed the shape of fire. Stalagmite fire was truly something that had both fire and water. However, fire was definitely its primary attribute, so it was ranked into the ranks of fire seeds. There were many kinds of fire, but it was sorted according to the attributes. Generally, there were four major categories of hot fire, yang fire, yin fire, and cold fire. Hot fire was the most commonly seen fire. Its most important quality was its high temperature. The streaming fire from the streaming fire seal formation was a classical hot fire. Yang fire were sorted based on being masculine and yang. The golden crow fire that Xuemo dreamed about was the epitome of yang fire. Yin fires, which were commonly also called ghost fire, were born from yin energy, such as Shura fire. Cold fire was also called icy flame. Its unique quality was cold and icy. They usually were born in extremely dark and cold places. There were also some strange and weird flames that were hard to sort. Those flames, they were usually the finest of flames and were treasures that every shoujo dreamed about. But no matter the type of flame, they would have the basic quality of fire, melting. This was also one of the reasons why the fire method was the most mainstream methods for dan making. In the next few days, Xuemo studied the stalagmite fire. The present stalagmite fire was extremely tame. If he sent it east, it definitely wouldn't go west. Controlling fire depended on the consciousness. Xuemo's consciousness was his strong suit and he could control it with ease. He could even use some complex manipulations. After playing for a few days until he was familiar, Xuemo thought about making yin fire beads. Yin fire beads was only a general name. In reality, the yin fire beads that were made with different flames would all be different. Even the author of Yin Fire Bead chapter, who detailed so many fire seeds, he didn't have all of the fire seeds. There were hundreds of fire seeds recorded in the Yin Fire Bead chapter. Only 68 had a description of the related Yin fire bead. There was nothing on what was the effect of the yin fire beads that would be created with the remaining fires. Stalagmite fire was one of the remainder. Xuemo himself was extremely curious. What kind of yin fire bead would be created using such a special fire as stalagmite fire? He started to make his first yin fire bead. Chapter 94, Why do my eyes always have tears in the stone room? Xuemo's eyes were closed, his legs coiled up. A ball of stalagmite fire was floating in front of him. Between the milky white flames, a yin bead could be seen. His hands continuously formed the spell. Following the changes in his fingers, bursts of ling power were sent into the flame. The important part of making an yin fire bead wasn't ling power but spiritual power. His consciousness carefully controlled the fire. The spell was extremely complicated and Xuemo instantly felt a heavy burden, especially when he needed to endure these conditions for about an hour. The pitiful Xuemo didn't know that usually making yin fire beads wasn't something a Zhuji Xiuzhe could accomplish. No one had told him. Pu Yao didn't tell him. The yin fire bead chapter didn't write of it. If he knew, he certainly wouldn't have tried. Sometimes, the ignorant had no fear. Xuemo, who had no knowledge, never even considered if his cultivation was enough to make the yin fire beads. Faithfully following the instructions on the yin fire bead chapter, he carefully worked at making the yin fire bead. One by one, mysterious light characters were sent into the stalagmite fire and burrowed into the yin bead. However, there was no change on the stalagmite fire or the yin bead. Time slipped away. Sweat gradually formed on Xuemo's forehead. Ling power was being used up too quickly. Based on this speed, the Ling power inside his body would quickly run dry. If his Ling power couldn't be maintained, the yin bead would be ruined. When he thought about it, the picture of the forest of signs in the free market proclaiming, purchasing yin beads at high prices, floated up in Xuemo's mind. Something that even Jin Dan were willing to pay high prices to buy, think of the price. The more he thought, the greater his flesh hurt. He seemed to see countless Jingshi waving their hands at him and flying further and further away. Damn it! As expected, Pu Yao's things weren't reliable. What, yin fire bead chapter, it was a mistake chapter. What situation was this? Xuemo was panicked, angry and unwilling. Even though his own life wasn't in danger right now, but so many Jingshi waving goodbye to him wasn't any different from being repeatedly stabbed by daggers. If he wasn't still in the process of forging, Xuemo probably would have ran over to Pu Yao to start arguing. Just at this time, in his sea of consciousness, Pu Yao unconcernedly raised his head, forging this early. Young people are really full of motivation. Finishing, he closed his eyes, mind at ease, and listened to his sound tablet. If Xuemo heard this, he would be spitting pints of blood. He was very pitiful, still ignorant of the situation. The only thing he was certain of right now was that he hadn't missed one word. Yet the situation in front of his eyes was completely different from the description in the yin fire bead chapter. According to the yin fire bead chapter, he only needed to maintain it for an hour. Right now though, his Ling power was almost empty. Was his cultivation not enough? Xuemo finally realized the problem, but his realization had come too late. In the end, he couldn't bear to give up this yin bead, gritting his teeth and persisting. He'll keep going as long as he was able. He couldn't just stand by and watch as the yin bead was wasted. He suddenly thought about how he used his consciousness to monitor the Dan during Dan making. He took out a small portion of consciousness to carefully skimp and control the Ling power in his body. The usage of Ling power instantly lessened. However, if it kept on going like this, he still couldn't make it. Xuemo gritted his teeth and divided out another portion of his consciousness to carefully control a small ball of Ling power. To avoid conflict with the continuously changing finger motions on his hands, Xuemo led the burst of Ling power to the gushing spring point on the bottom of his feet. If he didn't have this little sliver of consciousness, Xuemo basically didn't have the attention to spare to control the Ling power. Just the finger motions that could not be stopped were enough for him to deal with. But since he divided his consciousness, he could do three things at once. The feeling of his head being divided into three was extremely uncomfortable. Just a little while, and Xuemo felt his head start to hurt. This was an extremely familiar feeling. Previously, when Xian Xianxia's sword essence had wounded his consciousness, it had been this feeling. It was that time that he had landed in Pu Yao's trap of embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation. But for Jingshi, for yin beads, Xuemo endured. Using all his power, he channeled the little bit of Ling power towards the gushing spring point. He started to continuously revolve the Ling power faster. The Ling power started to revolve faster and gradually, it formed into a little whirlpool. There seemed to be suction force coming from the bottom of his feet. The Ling energy in the surroundings seemed to slowly move towards the little whirlpool. This was something Xuemo had never tried before. But for Jingshi, Xuemo didn't care about it that much. Speaking of it, the inspiration for this came from the Li Water Sword scripture, 7 whirlpools. If this was the speed at which he usually absorbed Ling energy, then he would have run out. Without any other solution, Xuemo thought of this risky way. The Ling power on his feet quickened and Ling energy gradually was suctioned in. As the Ling energy that was sucked in entered the little whirlpool, the whirlpool started to grow, the speed increasing. The Ling energy in the surroundings seemed to be pulled, great amounts pouring towards the whirlpool in Xuemo's feet. Hiss! Xuemo inhaled sharply, the stalagmite fire floating in front of his chest trembling, almost collapsing. He felt like there were nails coming out of the ground, continuously being hammered into his foot. The gushing spring point might be one of the major points in the body, but Xuemo had never used it to absorb Ling energy before. Using it so heavily right now, it would be strange if it didn't hurt. But, for Jingshi, Ge will bear it. Xuemo tragically and furiously continued to channel Ling power, speeding up the rate of Ling energy absorption. The Ling energy from the air, when it was absorbed into the body, needed to go through a process of refining before it can be turned into cultivation. The purer the Ling energy, the stronger the power, the more easily it could be controlled and would not influence the mind. Xuemo couldn't care that much right now. Impure Ling power was still Ling power. At least, it could work in a pinch. Right now, he was like a starving man who hadn't eaten in 10 years. Any bit of Ling energy, he would ravenously pull it in. With the supply of new Ling power, Xuemo could finally relax. The quality of the Yin fire bead that would be forged wasn't something Xuemo was going to consider at this point. He would thank the heavens and earth if he could just finish. Ge's life is always so tragic. Xuemo was tragically angry. Absorbing the stalagmite fire, he had almost lost his little life. Forging the Yin fire bead, he was in great pain. The piercing pain from his feet, the jerking pain from his consciousness being split in 3, the tearing pain from the impure Ling power moving in his channels. Why do my eyes always contain tears? Because I love the Jingshi so deeply, still painful. Xuemo was shocked that he had the time for such nonsensical thoughts at this time, but he quickly didn't have the attention. Ling energy, not having been purified, it was much harder to control. The spells that he could easily complete before now became extremely difficult. The interior of his body was at a precarious equilibrium. The slightest shift and the balance would be broken, leading to a complete loss. Therefore, he bore the pain and the tears, carefully maintaining the equilibrium inside his body. In the rock room, Xuemo was like a whirlpool, the Ling energy surrounding him flooding in. As the Ling energy entered his body, the stalagmite fire in front of him grew. Xuemo's clothes moved despite the lack of wind, flapping around. The sweat on his forehead continuously poured down. Even the dense Ling energy in the rock room couldn't endure the ferocity of Xuemo's absorption and emptied out. Only the Ling energy from the Ling vein continuously entered the bottom of Xuemo's feet. The bottom of Xuemo's feet were now bright red, like heated metal. If one looked closely, they would discover the rock-hard leg now seemed as though it had epilepsy, contorting and jerking. When the last spell was cast into the stalagmite fire, Xuemo couldn't stand up anymore, collapsing to the ground. He was so tired he didn't even want to move a finger. His entire body was like a toad that had been desinewed, his limbs doing strange convulsing motions. Pain. As he lied down, he instantly started to wail. The tearing pain of his channels, the throbbing pain from his wounded consciousness, and the piercing pain from the bottom of his feet. They all reminded him how bad his state was. After wailing for a while, Xuemo struggled up and crawled to pick up the Yin fire bead. The grey yin bead now seemed like clear glass. There were strands of white patterns inside, like clouds floating on a blue sky. So beautiful. Zhuo Mo's eyes became intoxicated. He felt that the pain he had just suffered through was worth it. He didn't know how powerful this yin fire bead was, but looking at such a beautiful bead, and thinking about how hard it had been to make it, did he bear to use it to test its power? Like it was a treasure, he carefully put it away. He struggled to stand and instantly shouted in pain. At some unknown time, his right foot had swollen into a ball. Just the slightest touch, much less walking, would result in a sharp needle-like pain. It really was people die for wealth, animals die for food. Zhuo Mo thought as he maintained a strange posture as he jumped on one leg out of the rock room. For this yin fire bead, he had paid a serious price. It was relatively easy to deal with the wound in his consciousness. Embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation was specifically for healing consciousness wounds. What was more serious was the damage in his channels. He had to run to Fragrant Ginger Yard to find Su Qing for a few medical dan in order to slowly heal him. Thankfully, for Xiaoxia, channel damage might not be usual, but it was one of the most common situations, so the sect didn't lack for treatments. When Su Qing saw Zhuo Mo's sorry state, she was very shocked. Zhuo Mo Xixiang's name was now known far and wide. At least, the name of the scalping zombie was known in the area around Wukong Sword Sect. The wastrels from Lingying's sect, it had been quite a few days since they came to harass the sect. Who had beaten Xixiang this badly? However, it wasn't her place to ask. She hurriedly took out 5 medical dan, handing them to Zhuo Mo. Seeing Zhuo Mo take them and turn around, she hesitated, and then weakly added, "Xixiang, it's 1 piece of 3rd-grade jingsha for each dan. In total, it's 5 3rd-grade jingsha." The one-legged Zhuo Mo's body shook. He almost fell down. He really made a great loss. And right now, he didn't have 1 jingsha left. He could only wave his hand, deferring, on the tab. 1 piece of jingsha stumped heroes. Oh. Su Qing nodded and then reminded Zhuo Mo, "Xixiang, the payment deadline is in 10 days, don't forget." "Xixiang is owing, let me see." Finishing, she took out a little book and flipped 2 pages, reciting, the materials that Xixiang had been using for dan making hadn't been cleared yet. Adding on today, in total, it is 30 pieces of 3rd-grade jingsha. Zhuo Mo felt everything darken. Chapter 95, A Method forced out 30 pieces of 3rd-grade jingsha. If this was not long ago, he wouldn't feel it was anything major, but for him at the present, this was undoubtedly a large debt. He could not make golden crow pills, so his most important income source was cut off. He did have a lot of yin beads, but he didn't dare to sell them. It had caused such a ruckus recently, and he had almost lost his little life. If someone found out that he had yin beads, no, if someone knew that the person who was selling yin beads last time was him, then his little life was definitely not going to survive. Jingsha was valuable, but his life was even more precious. There was still some time until the fiery red flower in the Ling Gardens would mature, and he couldn't exchange for jingsha right now. He could risk it and sell the moisture dan. But right now, he only had 3 moisture dan. The efficiency of the water method really made people speechless. He could sell the icy cloud grass for a pretty good price, but for Ling grasses this rare, if he sold it, it would be hard to buy in the future. Gather together 30 pieces of 3rd-grade jingsha in 10 days. These recent days, it kept on circling in his head. Even when he was nourishing his channels, he was still pondering it. But as time passed away, and the deadline of 10 days was coming closer, Zhuo Mo still didn't have a solution. Did he have to go sell some of the talismans? His gaze landed on the talismans on his own body and ached in pain. These were all the finest of the 3rd-grade talismans. It would be a pity to sell them. As to the vambrace and Ling armor Su Yi Xixiang and Yen Lusherbua sold him, the quality was so-so and wouldn't sell for a high price. Why haven't the people from Lingying's sect come even once these days? If a few more came, wouldn't this problem be solved? Not just 30 pieces of third-grade Jingshi, even if it was double that, it wouldn't be a problem. The people from Lingying's sect didn't have one cheap item on their body. Those days were dangerous, but he had suddenly become rich. Xuemo yearned for those days, the satisfaction and happiness that had risen. Suddenly, his mind moved. They weren't coming to find GE could go find them. Once this idea popped out, Xuemo instantly became excited. He jumped up from the floor, limping as he paced back and forth, his mouth muttering. The first reaction he had was, it was plausible. However, he restrained the joy inside and started to ponder the problems involved. Being challenged and going to challenge was completely different things. If he went to challenge at someone else's territory, if he wasn't careful, he would be swarmed. He needed to make sure the other side would respond, yet wouldn't enrage the other side so they would swarm him, and he couldn't alarm the elders of Lingying's sect. He needed to think about this, make a good plan. In the dark room, Xuemo rubbed his chin, his zombie face expressionless. Only that pair of eyes flashed with the light of Jingshi. The Dong Fu Sword Test Conference was an extremely hot topic. From the size and the influence, the Dong Fu Sword Test Conference naturally couldn't compare to the Sword Test Conference of the entire Kunlun realm. However, the generous prizes attracted many young experts who didn't have much wealth, dramatically increasing the skill level of the Sword Test Conference. As the skill level of the conference increased, some young experts who were not tempted by the prizes into attending left their sects to travel to Dongfu. This was a rare chance to spar with other sections. They didn't care about the prizes, but such a great chance to gain experience, it would be too much of a pity to miss it. For these non-local experts, if they wanted to attend the Sword Test Conference, they needed to start from the preliminary Sword Test Conference. Consequently, even the preliminary conference became a very popular spectacle, lots of experts and a great viewing experience. Gu Rongping, coming from one of the 13 primary towns of Dongfu, Clear Sky Lake, his Heart Lake sword was untraceable. From the first round of the prelims, he was undefeated for all 13 rounds. His appearance was extremely dignified and handsome, his conduct elegant, quickly becoming the best cultivation partner in the eyes of Dongfu's females. Every one of his battles would be extremely noisy, the screams of the females ringing in the ears. Starting from the 5th round, those women had formed groups to seek information, and do all kinds of things to disturb the opponent. Gu Rongping quickly became the opponent others didn't want to encounter the most. Coming from another primary town, Gue Feng was the most eye-catching young talent. His little ghost sword was strange and hard to predict, the power was astounding. Adding on his unpredictable footwork, he was labeled the hardest opponent to fight with. Coming out of poverty, no sect, no family, Nan Menyang brightened everyone's eyes. His talent was strange, extreme strength. The 2nd grade, Vajra chant, was used with his mountain breaker sword, for an extremely offensive and powerful style. The broadsword moved strong like they could break a mountain. He attracted the eyes of many sections. Such a great piece of jade, if they would take him in, they would only profit. Other young experts like Nan Menyang who didn't have a sect or family started to come out and display their talents. The Dongfu Sword Test Conference attracted the eyes of all the powers. Each sect was always hungry for talented disciples. No one who be bothered by having too many geniuses in their sect. A sect's prosperity and continuation wasn't dependent on one person. Sky Moon Jie's well-known sects, other than sending their disciples for experience, also sent out their elders to discover those youths of great potential. The little sects hoped to rope in those disciples with no family or sect. The bigger sects even dared to go after the geniuses of the small sections. Persuasion, prices, promises. Even the cause of it all, Tian Songzi, had never thought that his action of holding the Dong Fu sword test conference would actually cause a shuffling of the powers in Sky Moon Jia. In the stone room, Suemo stretched out, his bones cracking. He expressionlessly opened his eyes glowing with a light like that of a wolf. The damaged channels in his body had fully recovered. His consciousness had also recovered. These recent days, he had cultivated very hard. The progression of Vajra Profound Sutra was a surprise to him. He had originally assumed that the gravestone version would be significantly slower. Yet after the initial slow period, Suemo's progression was extremely quick. However, the unexpected speed of improvement made him insecure. Many times, he had been doubting himself, suspicious that he was cultivating it incorrectly. Recently, due to the string of incidents that he encountered in cultivation, it made Suemo suspicious of anything to do with Puyao. Even though this, Vajra Profound Sutra, didn't come from Puyao, but the gravestone under Puyao's butt. Other than healing, Suemo spent all his time cultivating. There were still 3 days until the deadline. Fully recovered and ready, Suemo decided to set out. He had prepared very well already. Like the Lingdan that could restore Ling power, even if it was 2 pieces of 3rd-grade Jingshi, Suemo still gritted his teeth and put 5 on the tab. Lingying sect was located at Lingying Mountain. Coming to the mountain gate of Lingying Mountain, looking at the magnificent gate entirely made out of jade, Suemo couldn't help but sigh at the wealth of Lingying sect. Lingying sect had 19 peaks, the area they occupied was more than 7 times the area of Wukong sword sect. Supposedly, Lingying sect had started out with 1 peak, but the sect leaders had been skilled at management and the other 18 peaks had all been bought by the sect leaders with Jingshi. Lingying sect's main gate faced the road, and could be reached by rock stairs. The location was extremely advantageous and many people passed by. In reality, Suemo's heart was beating hard. In Dongfu, Lingying sect's reputation was much more famous than Wukong sword sect. Lingying sect had more than a few dozen disciples that were in Juji alone. No matter how strong you were, if they all attacked you, you couldn't make it. But thinking about the 3 days until the deadline, Suemo felt a burst of courage. Looking at the mountain gates that were carved out of jade, Suemo wanted to tear it down and lug it home, then sell it for Jingshi. Calm. He needed to be calm. Suemo repeatedly told himself. Thinking about the plan he had made earlier. The disciples from Lingying sect had noticed this stranger very early on. "Hey, what are you doing here?" A Lingying sect disciple shouted as his brows furrowed, "Don't you know this is Lingying sect?" He scanned Suemo and said scornfully, "Our sect's rules, those improperly dressed cannot enter." The other Lingying sect disciple said discontentedly, "Shitty, don't waste words with him. Just throw him out." This crowd of little minions, Suemo naturally didn't take them seriously. To say nothing else, but the fact that these two didn't have much on their body was enough for Suemo to disregard them. He was too lazy to pay attention to them, unconcernedly stating, "Call Wenfei out." The expressions of the 2 Lingying sect disciples changed. One of them lectured, "You dare to call Wen Shixiang, I am Suemo of Wukong sword sect." Suemo lazily interrupted. The lecturing voice suddenly stopped, the faces of the 2 people changing. The scalping zombie, the 2 looked at each other, and the person who had been speaking shuddered. The other person instantly ran towards the mountain. Seeing the reactions, Suemo was very smug. It seemed that Ge did have a reputation. But then he became slightly discontent. This nickname was really not pleasing to the ear. A short while later, Wenfei and a group of people dressed in a multitude of colors appeared in Suemo's vision. Suemo's mind became alert, the light in his eyes increasing. They were like that of a wolf, having just seen a herd of fat sheep. Each motion this crowd of people made, Suemo seemed to see human-like structures composed of countless Jingshi moving. When Wenfei saw Suemo, his face instantly became dark. The old hate and the new hate collided and rose. He said coldly, "Brothers, what coming here today, is it to return the talismans you have borrowed from me and my brothers?" Zhuemo silently thought that this person was cunning and really wasn't a friendly person. He snickered, "Borrow? Is Brother Wen joking? Our sect's rules, anyone that comes to challenge must leave behind a talisman to show the result. If this one lost, Brother Wen can also pick a talisman from this one's body to serve as a memento. This is our sect's rules, one battle, one talisman. It's a pity that Brother Wen's luck wasn't very good and lost to this one. If Brother Wen wants to take it back, you can challenge me again at any time. However, if Brother Wen loses, you have to pay another talisman." Zhuemo bullshitted. Having his defeat being mentioned in front of the public, Wen Fei's face was dark, but he could not argue. Tao Zhu'er saw Wen Fei was on the edge of losing control and thought the little rat was horrid. She could only stand out, then why has Brothers Wu come this time? To show off in front of our sect? Zhuomo's spine straightened, standing taller, the light in his eyes increasing, his two hands fisted as he bowed in the direction of Wukong Mountains, his voice deep and grave. "Miss Tao is joking. There were 5 Xixiang from Lingying's sect who came overall to challenge our sect. Our sect leaders have sternly taught us, our Wukong sword sect may be small, but needs to maintain our reputation. And has also said that matters between disciples should be resolved by disciples. This matter had started because of me and naturally cannot be given to someone else. I have not come with discourtesy but to ask for guidance from 5 of the Lingying sect Xixiang, one by one. After these 5 fights, no matter win or loss, this matter will be resolved. I heard that the Xixiang of Lingying's sect have always been magnanimous and the sect's conduct is just. To be able to spar with 5 of the Xixiang, one by one, this little disciple would be happy even if I didn't win. Please, help guide me." The passerbys only saw that at the gate of Lingying's sect, a thin youth was facing the wealthy experts of Lingying's sect, dignified and calm, not afraid, and all stopped in their steps. The words were loud and clear, extremely resolute. Passing through the air, the listeners felt their blood boil. Chapter 96, A Cold Light. Zhuemo made a very detailed plan. First, he had to declare his intentions. This seemingly useless action was in reality very important. It could effectively stop the incident from running out of control. If the two sides really ended up having a major disagreement, the ones who would lose would definitely be Wukong's sword sect who had less people. The second effect was to not alert the elders of the sect. Originally, Zhuemo had thought of making an even bigger spectacle so the chances they would all attack him together would be smaller. But if too many people watched, the face of Lingying's sect would be damaged, and the elders of the sect would quickly find his elders. The sect leader definitely wouldn't forgive him. Even more, Zhuemo had deliberately flattered them. What disciples have always been magnanimous and the sect's conduct is just. It was all to push the other onto the rack to roast. How could he make the other accept an one-on-one challenge? He needed to make sure they saw hope of victory. As long as the others felt they could win, they definitely wouldn't retreat. Especially when they were being challenged. Due to their confidence, their face, they would accept it. Consequently, Zhuemo challenged to fight 5 people one after the other. In his words, he had emphasized, one by one, twice. The one that was at a disadvantage in this plan was Zhuemo. His core idea was very simple. He would first place himself in a disadvantageous position. The disciples of Lingying's sect, no matter if it was confidence, or face, it wouldn't be good for them to go over the line. One person battling 5 in a row. If it was like this and Lingying's sect still lost, these people could only suck it up. Their elders would have nothing to say and wouldn't have the face to go to Wukong Mountain to make trouble for Zhuemo. They couldn't afford the embarrassment. Of course, one person fighting 5 in a row was extremely disadvantageous for Zhuemo. He wasn't so confident to the point he believed he could win over all 5. But he didn't need to win all the fights. He had come for the Jingshi. Everything was fine as long as he made a profit. In other words, if he could win 3 out of the 5 fights, he would make a profit. Of course, the prerequisite was that the talismans on the losers didn't suck. The level of difficulty in winning 5 fights was too high. Mo had never thought about it. Winning 3 battles, Mo felt that it might be risky, but it was possible. In the last little while, his cultivation had increased greatly, and the initial merging between the water sword essence and tidal sword essence had increased his confidence. So after thinking it over, the large debts caused Mo to make a decision and come. He had been very cunning with his virtuous words. When he saw the value of what this group of people was wearing, Mo's desire for battle rose. Luxury was a crime. Each of them had at least a few talismans that were not lower in value than what Mo had taken. He wouldn't be making a loss today. As to the 1 battle, 1 talisman, he had just made it up. In any case, no one would run to the sect leader to ask for proof. Great. This one admires brothers was bravery very much. Brothers what is right, disciples have a responsibility to the reputation of their sect. Since Brothers Wa has made a challenge, we will naturally receive it. Count me in. One person walked out of the crowd of Ling Ying's sect disciples. This person was the eldest disciple of Ling Ying's sect, Lin Yuan. His face was proud as he looked at Mo with a raised chin. Lin Yuan was the eldest disciple in Ling Ying's sect. He had strong connections to Ling Ying's sect, his family was a famous merchant clan in Sky Moon Jia, and his wealth was the greatest among all of the disciples. Due to the fact that his family's business provided great aid to Ling Ying's sect, it caused his status in Ling Ying's sect to be very special. Tao Zhuer looked in sympathy at eldest Xixiang, but tightly closed her mouth, not saying a word. Eldest Xixiang usually was very conceited, and in Ling Ying's sect, where everyone competed on background and family, no one dared to go against him, gradually forming his conceited and arrogant temper. Yan Mingzi hid in the back, mockery in his eyes. Perhaps, out of all these people, he was the one who most accurately guessed Mo's aim. For some reason, when he saw Mo, he would think of the other's greedy expression when he was plundering. Hu Shan and the others had tasted defeat at Mo's hands and smirked in the shadows. There were many disciples in Ling Ying's sect, constantly fighting, and their relationships were very complicated. They naturally were willing to see others trip up. That way, no one would mock them about this incident again. They had spread the name of the scalping zombie far and wide, but the great majority of people hadn't seen it for themselves. How could they believe it? Especially when it was the conceited and arrogant disciples of Ling Ying's sect. They only felt that Hu Shan and the others weren't strong enough. They didn't even pay attention when Wen Fei was defeated. Rather, they scorned Wen Fei. So Wen Fei Xixiang, who was the focus of the elders, also had an inflated reputation. Even a guy from a little sect like Wukong Sword sect whose main profession was making medicine could defeat him. If that wasn't an inflated reputation, then what was? Wen Fei kept on feeling that there was smugness hidden deep in Mo's eyes. The two had fought before. He didn't believe one bit the words that had come out of Mo's mouth. When he saw eldest Xixiang Lin Yuan step out, he instantly knew that it was bad. He was very clear what eldest Xixiang's true power was. Even he had been defeated, how would eldest Xixiang even be a match? At this time, the cheers of the disciples caused the shadow over his heart to darken. Eldest Xixiang is mighty. As expected from eldest Xixiang. This composure, take a look at it. What's called being a role model, this is called a role model. Eldest Xixiang, let him have a taste of how powerful our Ling Ying sect is. What scalping zombie, when he comes here, he's the only one getting scalped. The flattery flowed like a flood. The light on Lin Yuan's face as he stepped out was even brighter. The head was raised high, like an arrogant and smug rooster. Such honor, would they let eldest Xixiang take it all? Some opponents of Lin Yuan who were in secret conflict with him couldn't restrain themselves and stood out as well. Count me in. I'll come. Dare to bully our Ling Yin sect. Humph, this one will see just how good you are. Another 3 people came out, all of them heads of various factions in Ling Ying's sect. If they didn't stand up now, it would be hard to maintain power in their factions. As expected, when the 3 came out, their faction members became excited and felt it was a great honor, calling out flattery. Wen Fei grimaced inside. He glanced at Zhuo Mo out of the corner of his eyes. He felt that under the expressionless visage, the other would definitely be laughing. The people who step out, if it was machinations and scheming, partisan politics, they were very good. But if it was the sword? He saw a few more people wanting to join in and could only push hard at the Xixiang beside him and shout loudly. Chang Xixiang at the end. Chang Xixiang, who had been pushed out, looked with slight surprise at Wen Fei, and said, I had assumed you would have another fight. Why push me out? Please, Xixiang, help me take back my ring. Wen Fei had a pleading expression. A surprised expression made its way onto Chang Xixiang's face. Wen Fei's actions directly admitted that he wasn't a match. He looked in interest at Zhuo Mo. He turned his face to smile at Wen Fei, all right. After Wen Fei shouted, all the voices suddenly stopped. The people who had been tempted all shrunk back. The mood became slightly strange. The fiery atmosphere suddenly became silent, completely silent. The expressions of the 3 who had said they would fight became slightly unnatural. There wasn't much change in Lin Yuan's expression, but the uncontrollable wariness in his eyes made Zhuo Mo pay special attention to this Chang Xixiang. It seemed this person was strong. Tao Zhu'er, and the others, after hearing Wen Fei yell Chang Xixiang at the end, they first paused and then became joyous. Ho, now that's something to see. Hu Shan said in a quiet voice, unable to suppress the excitement in his voice. That's so true. After Chang Xixiang fought 2 years ago, until now, I've never seen Chang Xixiang fight again. Yan Mingzi was extremely excited. Chang Xixiang has been resting his body and mind, Hu Shan said. Che, only ghosts believe that. Yan Mingzi said disdainfully. Tao Zhu'er suddenly turned around and added, even ghosts don't believe it. Lin Yuan was dissatisfied with the present mood. This damned guy called Chang, nothing good happened whenever he came out. He spoke to break the suffocating silence, all right. However, we'll say it first. If you lose, I can take a talisman from you. Naturally. There was still no expression on Zhuo Mo's zombie face. No one could see what he was thinking. He weakly added, but if you want this water drop sword, you have to wait until after the 5 fights for me to give you. I don't have a substitute flying sword. No problem. Lin Yuan generously said. He looked like he was already the victor. Lin Yuan's supporters became excited again. They widened their eyes, afraid of missing a detail. Thinking about the picture of eldest Xixiang beating this horrid zombie up, it would be very interesting. The water drop sword floated in front of Zhuo Mo's chest like a leaf floating in water. Chang Xixiang's eyes focused. His eyes were very experienced. The water drop sword looked like it was quietly floating, but in reality, it was making extremely small movements. It was like a snake that had already found its target and was waiting for a chance. This was an extremely tiny detail. However, he had to rejudge the strength of this weak-looking youth. In comparison, Wen Fei's response was much faster and his face much uglier. He had fought with Zhuo Mo before and he had a direct understanding of the other's strength. Right now, this opening move gave him great pressure that hadn't appeared when they had fought last time. There was only one explanation. In this interval of time, Zhuo Mo had become stronger. Zhuo Mo's legs were naturally spread out, his face slightly lowered, his eyes looking down like an old monk in meditation. Lin Yuan smirked and took out his flying sword. This was a flying sword that was entirely gold, countless seals carved on it. Between the seals, golden light flashed like ripples of water. "Young Emperor Sword, 4th grade," he said proudly. Hiss, the Xianxia in the surroundings inhaled sharply, their eyes hot as they looked at the sparkling gold sword. A 4th grade flying sword was very rare in Sky Moon Jia. Enjoying the envious and admiring glances of everyone else, Lin Yuan's mood was very good. He postured, "You are a guest. This one will let you have 3 moves." Zhuo Mo didn't move. It was like he didn't hear it. Seeing the situation, Lin Yuan was dissatisfied with Zhuo Mo's lack of cooperation and snorted, "If you are looking for death, then don't blame this one. Attack." The sound fell and Zhuo Mo suddenly opened his eyes. It was impossible to describe the cold light that flashed through Zhuo Mo's eyes. It was like an extremely sharp and vicious sword energy, and also like a poisonous snake that had been hiding in the shadows who suddenly bared its fangs. The water-drop sword that had been quietly floating in front of his chest disappeared. It suddenly appeared at Lin Yuan's neck, the sword point slightly spilling out a sword energy, just barely grazing Lin Yuan's neck. Lin Yuan's expression was dumb as he stood, maintaining his posture. He was afraid to move. On his well-maintained and lily-white neck, a drop of blood was very bright. The mountain gate of Lingying's sect was deathly silent. Chapter 97, Lin Yuan's plotting. Lin Yuan's entire body was still, beads of sweat sliding off his face, his eyes filled with terror. He could clearly feel the bone-aching coldness from the sword energy that was just touching his skin. All the hairs on his body were raised. He didn't tremble. It wasn't that he was bolstered by his bravery, but that he didn't dare to. He did his best to maintain his posture, afraid that the slightest bit of movement would cause the sword energy to move. For some unknown reason, he kept on feeling that if there was an accident, the sword energy at the tip of the flying sword would unhesitatingly cut into his neck. Maybe it was the steadiness of the flying sword, maybe it was Zhuo Mo's eyes, maybe. It didn't matter that he knew Zhuo Mo didn't dare to kill him, but he didn't dare to gamble. "I surrender." Lin Yuan's voice was dry and raspy, nothing remaining of the past conceit and proudness. It echoed in a patch of silence and could be heard clearly. The coldness disappeared from his neck without any warning. Lin Yuan's heart finally settled down. He swallowed, looking in terror at Zhuo Mo and the water-drop sword that was peacefully floating in front of his chest. There was only one thought in his head. This person couldn't be provoked. The spectators finally managed to react, dissolving into noise. Disbelief was on everyone's faces. No one could have thought that the entire battle would finish so quickly. When Lin Yuan took out the 4th grade, Young Emperor sword, the great majority had already assumed his victory. The gap between 4th grade and 3rd grade flying swords was an extremely large one. But, one move, and Lin Yuan lost. In the crowd of spectators, a cold light flashed through a pair of eyes hidden in the shadows. Lin Yuan focused. He pretended to be generous and opened, "I lost. You can take down any of the talismans on my body." People like him, what they were afraid of losing was both the fight and their honor. Losing in battle wasn't major. He hadn't created his power based using physical power. But if he lost his reputation, then it was really sweeping the floor. His heart was still beating heavily. "Please do not pick." Then the Ling armor on Brother Lin's body. Zhuo Mo said. "All right." Lin Yuan rushed to answer, afraid Zhuo Mo would take it back. He had been afraid that Zhuo Mo would pick the 4th grade, Young Emperor sword. The Moonwater Black Turtle armor might be a fine 3rd grade Ling armor, and he had put a lot of effort into getting it, but it couldn't compare to Young Emperor sword. Young Emperor sword had been bestowed down by the sect leader. If it was lost, it would be bad for him. Lin Yuan rapidly took the Ling armor off his body, throwing it to Zhuemo, deliberately pretending to be forthright. Brothers Wu really is skilled. Lin Yuan has no compunctions about losing. I'll take Brothers Wu as my friend. In the future, if you need any help, please speak. Zhuemo raised his hands in a greeting. Brother Lin's demeanor is extraordinary. This little brother admires it. To be able to interact with people like Brother Lin, this little brother feels very honored. His hands, however, were extremely fast and impolite in putting the Moonwater Black Turtle armor onto his body. The Moonwater Black Turtle armor was entirely black, constructed of 36 black turtle shells, and forged with essence of moonwater. It was extremely durable. Zhuemo could tell as he put the armor on that this was far better than the Ling armor that Yan Lushirwa had given him. It was both comfortable and breathable, and the Ling energy inside the black turtle armor slowly seeped into Zhuemo's body, extremely pleasurable. Zhuemo felt extremely good inside, disregarding the size that came from the surroundings. Of course, he knew that, based on just the price, the 4th grade, Yang Emperor sword, that Lin Yuan had far surpassed this, Moonwater Black Turtle armor. However, this was also where he was the smartest. If he demanded the Yang Emperor sword, even though Lin Yuan would give the Yang Emperor sword to him due to face, but that way, this incident would increase in severity. A 4th grade flying sword, there wasn't many of those in Wukong sword sect. In all of the disciples, only Wei Xingxi's splitting rainbow was 4th grade. Coveting this flying sword, that was waiting for the others' elders to come find him. Not just that, he would also enter into an unsolvable disagreement with Lin Yuan. The other would certainly hate him. Also, Yang Emperor sword wasn't suited for Zhuemo. At most, he could sell it for some jingxia. But, Moonwater Black Turtle armor, he could use it right now. Wearing it on his body, his defensive power would increase dramatically. He would have more confidence in making a profit this time. On someone else's territory, being too arrogant meant a terrible death. Zhuemo got a bargain and gave Lin Yuan enough face. Lin Yuan managed to keep possession of Yang Emperor sword, and got face. His mood instantly rose. As for the Moonwater Black Turtle armor, just a 3rd grade talisman, he didn't care that much. Lin Yuan threw a jade scroll at Zhuemo, generously saying, "This jade scroll has the directions to use this Moonwater Black Turtle armor. For this armor to land in the hands of a hero like Brothers Wu, this little brother is very honored." He then scanned the surroundings, and said clearly, Brothers Wu is 1 against 5. Everyone should admire his courage. However, is our Lingying sect those that take advantage of others? This unskilled one suggests that, after each of Brothers Wu's fights, he can rest for an hour to recover his Ling energy, and be fair. How does everyone feel? Lin Yuan's actions instantly aroused the agreement of many people. Lin Shixiang is really a honest person. Didn't think that a disciple of Lingying's sect could have a demeanor like this. It really isn't easy, isn't easy. No matter if it was the disciples of Lingying's sect or the other spectators, they all spoke praises. Zhuemo took the jade scroll, praising, Brother Lin is really a genuine person. However, the faces of the 3 people who were going to fight next were extremely bad, their eyes hateful as they glared at Lin Yuan. Chang Shixiang, however, was staring at Zhuemo, his expression pondering. Zhuemo hadn't thought that the situation would change to be like this. Looking at the eyes of the other 3 people, Zhuemo's heart was like a mirror. This Lin Yuan really helped him out. With this jade scroll, he didn't need to search on his own. 1 hour, it was enough for him to broadly grasp how to use this Ling armor. As to recovering Ling energy, the previous fight had been so quick he basically hadn't used any Ling energy at all. Lin Yuan bowed with his hands at Zhuemo and proudly went back to his troop. That demeanor, there was nothing remaining of his expression when he had just lost. The shitty that were dependent on him gave a flood of praise for Lin Yuan's generosity. Lin Yuan pretended to calmly wave his hand, smirking inside. He didn't have good intentions in giving the instructions to the Moonwater Black Turtle Armor, to Zhuemo. He had gone first and lost. If his competitors won, then no matter how successful his performance was, it wouldn't make a difference. He had been generous in giving the Moonwater Black Turtle Armor to Zhuemo and suggested that Zhuemo could rest for an hour between each fight so to undermine the people after him. Increasing Zhuemo's power was attacking his opponents. If those people also lost, he would have lost honorably. If the other people wanted to copy him, it definitely wouldn't have the same effect. The other people were not able to object to Lin Yuan's reasonable suggestions. They could only stare with dark faces at Zhuemo sitting cross-legged on the ground. An hour later, Zhuemo finally opened his eyes. He was extremely happy inside. As expected, this Moonwater Black Turtle Armor was very good. There were natural seal formations on the shells of black turtles. When they were used, flying swords would have a hard time breaking through. The second Lingying sect disciple had been impatiently waiting long ago. When Zhuemo opened his eyes, he walked out. He threw the bright red cape off his body, revealing the tight clothes underneath. When the other tore off the cape, Zhuemo's eyes became straight. This guy. Disregarding the glowing Ling armor on his body, not saying anything of the finest third-grade vambrace, Zhuemo wouldn't even look at the bright red, crimson blood bull boots. His eyes were staring fixedly at the other's waist, wrist and chest. On the belt, there was a miscellany of paper seals. Oh no, a collection of paper seals that would make someone think this guy sold seals for a living. Second grade, turtle shell seal. Second grade, multiple ghost shadows. Second grade, domineering 5 thunder seal. On the wrists, a circle of one-use talismans were tied. Second grade, sharp-headed prickly snake shuttle. Second grade, 1-star galaxy. Second grade, light rain twin sparrows. There were a few pouches hanging on his chest, the smell of medicine wafting out. To Zhuemo, whose main profession was Dan medicine, he was too familiar with this smell. Ling returning Dan, that was used to recover Ling energy, definitely not lower than second grade. Red flower Dan, used to stem bleeding, also not lower than second grade. The plum-colored Dan, that had a special smell, second grade miasma. On the outside of his legs, hanging on one of them was a second grade, Great Sun Moon Will, the other a second grade, Sky Net. Not just Zhuemo, all the spectators were completely dumbstruck. Yan Mingzi snickered, it looks like Wang Xixiang is going all out. Using his ultimate medicine seal style from the start. Hu Shan looked with fear at Wang Xixiang, who was standing fully armored. Only upon personal experience can one know the power of Wang Xixiang's medicine seal style. He had once fought against Wang Xixiang, and had been completely suppressed for the entire battle, almost to the point he couldn't raise his head. Yan Mingzi nodded sympathetically. The Xixiang that use medicine and seals in our sect cannot be counted, but to be like Wang Xixiang, to use the medicine seal style to such a degree, it had never happened before. Hu Shan, Wang Xixiang does have some real skill. Yan Mingzi added, his wealth is really abundant. The two couldn't help but fall silent. The disciples of Lingying's sect might all have wealthy families, but there were still very drastic differences between them. Like Wang Xixiang, who dared to use seals and medicine to such a degree, if he didn't have the wealth to back it up, he wouldn't dare to do so. Everyone could understand the core philosophy of the medicine seal style, to use Jingshi to win. While everyone could understand the concept, but it was another matter if they could do it. Wang Xixiang's seal medicine style once again proved a truth that had existed for countless years. This world, when you throw enough Jingshi at someone, the great majority of the time, you could win. Maybe, as a person, Wang Xixiang was not as personable as Lin Yuan, but his seal medicine style was still very famous in Lingying's sect. When he tore off the cape and revealed all he owned, all of the Lingying sect disciples suddenly became excited. That was because, in Lingying's sect, the absolute majority of disciples believed deeply in one truth: the person with the most jingxia was the one that was right. To the Xiuzhe that were passing by, this scene was an extremely heavy blow. These days, there was someone who could armor himself to such a frightening degree. Chapter 98, Zhuo Mo's fury and heartache. After a long while, Zhuo Mo's soul finally returned to his body. Even though his own attire had improved dramatically over the past, but seeing the other armed to the teeth, Zhuo Mo couldn't help but lose his soul. Of course, this wasn't due to shock at the other's power, but shock at so many talismans, paper seals, and Lingdan. Damn it! Zhuo Mo's eyes were bloody red. He looked as though he wanted to strip the other bare. When Ge is penniless, you. Zhuo Mo, who had come to fight for 30 pieces of second-grade jingxia, felt a burst of anger leave his chest and rush upwards. He was completely infuriated. Come! Wang Shixiang shouted confidently, and moved first. He was extremely wary of the flowing water that Zhuo Mo had sent out. Untraceable and fast, he didn't have a grasp on whether he would be able to combat it. Learning a lesson from Lin Yuan's fight, he decided to attack first, so after he spoke, he attacked. The multiple ghost shadow seal, that had already been gripped on both his hands beforehand, made a light bang. Everyone felt their eyes blur, and then 5 Wang Shixiang suddenly appeared on the battlefield. As expected, it is still this unrivaled and wretched starting move. Hu Shan sighed. Second grade, multiple ghost shadow seal. It could make 2 fake illusions that were exactly the same as the user. Using 2 of them simultaneously, there were instantly 4 illusions. Adding on the real one, it was hard to detect the real Wang Shixiang. This, multiple ghost shadow seal, evidently had been made well. It was extremely detailed to confuse the fakes with the real one. Other than cultivating a spell like Sky Eyes, Ghost Eyes, or Yin-Yang Eyes, it was basically impossible to tell. Zhuo Mo hadn't practiced a spell like that. He also hadn't thought that the other would use up 2 second-grade, multiple ghost shadow seal, at once. This expenditure, it was frightening. 1 second-grade, multiple ghost shadow seal, would require at least 20 pieces of third-grade jingxia. 2 of them was 40 pieces of third-grade jingxia. Gu was aching to hit someone like you. Zhuo, a poor guy, Mo's fighting spirit started to burn like a prairie fire, almost lighting up all the blood in his body. Since there are 5 of you, then all of you can accept it. Zhuo Mo gritted his teeth, raising his hand for 7 whirlpools, and it completely surrounded all 5 figures. This move was an extremely wide-range attack, perfectly suited for dealing with multiple ghost shadow seal. The fake ones were, in the end, fake. When they were torn by the sword energies, they instantly broke. It evidently was not the first time Wang Shixiang had encountered this situation. He wasn't panicked, his 2 hands blurring, whoosh whoosh whoosh, 3 paper seals leapt from his hand. Turtle seal, Vajrapani seal, empty explosion seal. 2 layers of protection were added to Wang Shixiang's body. The inner green one was turtle seal, the outer one was Vajrapani seal. The moment the empty explosion seal was thrown out, it exploded with a bang. A large shock occurred on the battlefield, an invisible high-speed air wave viciously spread out. The 7 whirlpools that had just destroyed the fake illusions instantly were smashed to pieces by this explosive air wave. At the center of the explosion, Wang Shixiang was not afraid. He had just put on 2 defensive paper seals on his body. The effect was evident at this time. The empty explosion seal was astoundingly powerful, but it still could not break through the 2 layers of protective armor. He was untouched. The spectators jumped in fright. Such an unreasonable way of battle, this was the first time they had seen it. The blood of the Lingying sect disciples were all boiling. They all knew that once Wang Shixiang was at an advantage, just wait for the storm to arrive. Mo was both sorrowful and furious. Second grade, turtle seal, 15 pieces of third grade jingsher. Second grade, vajrapani seal, 15 pieces of third grade jingsher. Second grade, empty explosion seal, 30 pieces of third grade jingsher. This string of numbers flowed across Mo's heart. Wang Xixiang's practiced response allowed him to take the initiative. He unhesitatingly started his attack. Sharp-headed prickle snake shuttle, 1-star galaxy, and light rain double sparrow were like a pack of wolves that smelt blood, murderously howling as they leapt at Mo. The howl of the sharp-headed prickly snake shuttle was able to shock a person's soul. The 3-CUN snake shuttle suddenly transformed in midair into a thin black snake. Like a streak of black lightning, it displayed its vicious and sharp fangs. 1-star galaxy was 7 dots of blue light, like a galaxy. It seemed extremely beautiful, without any killing intent. When light rain double sparrow flew into the air, it turned into 2 blue fork-tailed sparrow. With simultaneous calls, they flew a strange shape and headed straight for Mo. Wang Xixiang's move this time was extremely beautiful. All of Mo's retreats had been sealed shut. He had no place to escape. These one-use talismans were much more expensive than paper seals. 30 pieces of third-grade jingsher, 40 pieces of third-grade jingsher, 30 pieces of third-grade jingsher, another string of numbers flew past Mo's heart. Every time a number flowed past, Mo's heart felt pain. Up until now, he had successively felt pain 8 times. Any person who was in pain for 8 times, if they still seemed normal, then they were very skilled. But clearly, Mo wasn't. After his heart broke for the 8th time, the anger in his chest instantly reached a climax. If fire was used to describe someone's anger, then Mo was composed entirely of fire, blood-red flames streaming out of his body and into the sky. If he could tolerate this, what else couldn't he tolerate? No one could tolerate this. All the anger gathered and compressed at this instant. His eyes widened angrily, his hands moving as though he was throwing a large ball, crouching forward. The water-drop sword gave a clear ring and flew into the sky. The 5th move of Li Water Sword Scripture, Banana Rain. Wang Xixiang felt the sky above him darken and reflexively raised his head. His pupils suddenly widened, his expression changing. Not paying any more attention to the talismans that had left his hand, he raised his hand and threw out 2, domineering 5 thunder seal, and then whipped his hand to throw out a little red umbrella. The little umbrella was extremely small, about half the size of a pen. When it was sent out, it started to grow, flying above his head and protecting him. This was a one-use second-grade talisman, sleeve umbrella. Even though it was a one-use talisman, it was extremely expensive. Even Wang Xixiang, when it wasn't a crucial time, didn't bear to use it. However, the present situation was dangerous and he had no hesitations about using this card. Once the 2, domineering 5 thunder seals, left, it turned into 2 strings of 5 interconnected thunder exploding in the air. The banana rain referred to the rain hitting the banana plant. Other than this, there was another meaning. It was rumored, in the ancient era, there was an 8th-grade talisman called the banana fan. A gentle wave of this fan would create endless flames. Many heroes had been killed with this little banana fan. It had then become one of the most famous 5 attributed talismans. The banana of banana rain had the meaning of fire. The rain was a rain of fire, the fire was a snowy white cold fire. The area of Ling Ying's sect suddenly became cold. Even the completely jade mountain gate had a thin layer of frost. The fire had not arrived, but the coldness had explosively started to spread. Having merged in a tidal sword essence composed of countless icicles, the Li water sword essence had been completely changed. Originally, it had been a clear fire shape of water, right now, it seemed slightly similar to Mo's icy stalagmite fire. The fire rain which was white and cold gave off the feeling that it was snowing instead. However, no one was entranced by this beautiful scene. They were all shocked by the fatal murderous intent. In the white fire rain, sword essence crisscrossed, cold and icy, sharp, unable to be broken, endless. The 5 interconnected thunder crackled and howled as it rushed towards the slowly descending rain of fire in the sky. Many people silently praised the quickness of Wang Shixiang's reaction. The 2 domineering 5 thunder seal were very powerful. If it could block for a while, the 3 one-use talismans he had put out earlier could successfully attack Xuemo. The white fire rain that seemed to be slowly moving met the 5 thunder. Crack, crack, crack. Like the sound of electricity flashing in the water, the 2 strings of 5 interconnected thunder didn't even last for a second before strangely vanishing. Everyone who was watching all were shocked. In the middle of it all, deeply feeling the power in Xuemo's move, Wang Shixiang wasn't just shocked. This time, his face was slightly pale. He was praying that the sleeve umbrella would be effective. As an afterthought, he quickly threw out the great sun-moon wheel and sky net. Between protecting his life and killing the enemy, he chose to protect his life. Facing the 3 talismans that were gearing for him, Xuemo didn't dodge. He activated the Moonwater Black Turtle Armor. A blue light suddenly erupted from the black armor. A circle of light that was like water waves suddenly appeared around Xuemo. To be secure, he also started Vajra Profound Sutra. A layer of dark gold quickly appeared on the arms, head, and other parts that were exposed to the outside. Between protecting his life and killing the enemy, Xuemo chose to kill the enemy. He was gambling. Gambling that the other would choose to protect himself. He had won his gamble. The 3 one-use talismans that didn't have a person controlling them seemed powerful. When they hit the water-like blue light around Xuemo, the circle of light did shudder fiercely, and Xuemo's insides were affected and took a few steps back. However, these 3 one-use talismans had no lasting power, and turned to light, disappearing into the air. Xuemo had blocked these 3 one-use talismans. That meant that his risky endeavor had been successful and had taken the initiative. Right now, he could easily control the banana rain. Anger boiling, Xuemo smirked coldly. This move had just begun. The sleeve umbrella managed to stop the fire rain for a while. Even though the sword energies in the fire rain created cracks when they hit the umbrella, but this talisman that he had spent so much Jingxia to buy now showed it was worth that many Jingxia, managing to block off the fire rain. However, he couldn't be on the defense. That would mean defeat. Wang Shixiang was an extremely experienced fighter. Looking at the seemingly untouched Xuemo nearby, he gritted his teeth. But when he saw the light coming off the other's armor, his hate towards Lin Yuan was even greater. However, he didn't become dumb due to anger. He knew, if he won this match, that was slapping Lin Yuan's face in front of everyone. The acting that Lin Yuan had done beforehand would be completely wasted. Only he could be the hero. His hands reached for his waist. Seeing the other take out a stack of red and green paper seals from his waist, Xuemo, anger burning up his body, seemed to see rows of numbers flying past his eyes, his heart also seeming to feel throbbing pain. Wastrel. Shameless. Xuemo bared his teeth, the furious anger that covered his body exploding, his anger reaching its maximum. He unhesitatingly sent out the killing move that he had been readying for a long time. Chapter 99, Seal Soldier, Layered Wave. The white fire rain that was covering the sky gradually started to gather, merging into a white pillar of rain. The rain pillar shook, creating sprays, one wave after another, like an enormous white snake shaking in the sky, continuously shaking its body to attack that red umbrella. The power kept on gathering, kept on increasing. If it was said that it had been the rain hitting idly the banana leaf before, now it was a storm, the intensity having multiplied. Sleeve umbrella was still a one-use talisman in the end. It had not been nurtured for a long time. At this time, it couldn't bear the attack anymore and scattered with a boom. Great Sun Moon Wheel wasn't a defensive talisman in the first place and was even weaker, basically torn to pieces. The Sky Net was also shredded by countless sword energies. The questions relating to the power of talismans were extremely complex. Other than their grade, it was also connected to the time the Xianxia spent imprinting on the talisman. Usually, the longer they spent imprinting on it, the talisman would be more nimble and easier to control. The power would also be greater. This was why talismans had to be nourished. Other than this, some Xianxia who were skilled in seal formations, as their cultivation increased, they would forge the seal formations inside the talisman. Like Suomo's water drop sword, if it landed on Xian Xianxia's hands, and was reforged, it could easily rise to 4th or 5th grade. But with Suomo's pitiful cultivation, he didn't have the power to control it if it was 4th grade. It wasn't always, the higher the grade, the better the talisman. It depended on whether or not the talisman was suitable. The 4th grade, Yang Emperor sword, that Lin Yuan had was able to be controlled by Zhuji cultivators and was a very rare specimen. The benefit of a one-use talisman was that it did not need to be imprinted to be used. However, its power was far from the same grade talismans that had been nourished for a long time. People only had limited amounts of time and energy. The more talismans they had, the less they could spend imprinting on each talismans. Consequently, a true expert wouldn't have an abundance of talismans. They would only focus on imprinting a few and rely on those for most of their fights. If they could not easily manipulate their talismans in battle, it was an easy opportunity for their opponents. Talismans could aid or subdue each other. There were many patterns involved, and it was hard for people to predict all the situations encountered in battle. If they could stock up on a few one-use talismans that did not need to be imprinted, they would get a few more choices. It was the same rationale with paper seals. However, it was extremely rare for someone to use talismans and paper seals to such an extreme as Wang Xixiang. In the eyes of truly powerful experts, one-use talismans could work in an emergency, but it was too weak. In the lower-level fights, this kind of expendable strategy would almost always win. It was a pity that he had encountered Suomo who had comprehended sword essence. Sword moves that had sword essence as the core, the power would increase and would surpass the cultivator of the same power level. Only now did Wang Xixiang suddenly realize in shock that the white flame falling from the sky was not fire, nor rain, but sword energies. He almost could not believe this discovery. A guy in Zhuji, how could he give such a terrifying sword move? But in front of this many people, would Wang Xixiang be content with surrendering like this? He had his own pride. Red flashed through his eyes. He gritted his teeth. All in. A gold paper seal instantly appeared on his hand. Seal soldier. Someone from Lingying's sword sect who had been spectating shouted in shock, causing the crowd to rumble. Everyone's eyes were instantly attracted by the little gold paper seal. For the first time, Chang Xixiang had a serious expression. Among the crows, there was also a pair of eyes which suddenly became bright in the shadows. Chang Xixiang seemed to have perceived it, turning to glance over the crowd. Yan Mingzi muttered dazedly, "This is a seal soldier." Hu Shan gaped, speechless. The families of most Lingying set disciples were wealthy. Their experiences and knowledge wasn't something a poor guy like Suomo could compare with. Suomo might not recognize what this seal soldier was, but listening to the shocked murmurs of the crowd, he also knew that it was something magnificently powerful. However, at this time, his chest was filled with the sharp sword essence and he could not retreat. Wang Xixiang's face was solemn, his fingers moving, and his mouth quickly recited, "Powerful warrior protects master." As he finished speaking, a golden-armored soldier 3 zhang tall appeared beside him. The features of the golden-armored soldier were not clear. His entire body was enveloped inside the golden armor. He was standing without a weapon, but a heavy killing aura swept the whole field, and people couldn't not help but be in awe. The golden armored soldier, as it appeared, turned his head up towards the white rain snake in the sky, his hand pushing up, and boomed, "Ah!" Everyone felt their ears ring, like someone had taken a hammer and gave a blow to them. Everyone was shocked. Even Chang Shixiang, who had been calm all this while, slightly changed his expression. It was like the mighty white water pillar met an invisible barrier and splashed in all directions. Wang Shixiang, who was positioned underneath it, was untouched. Zhuo Mo's chest felt like it was hit. He grunted. A sweet fishy taste spread out in his mouth. He could help but be aghast. What was this? At this time, he could not retreat. He refocused and once again attacked. Pew! Wang Shixiang, who had been standing underneath the golden armor soldier, suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. The golden armored soldier towering over him wavered and then vanished like it was an illusion. I lost. Wang Shixiang's face was as pale as powder. He clearly had been wounded. He staggered as though he could collapse at any time. Zhuo Mo finally released a breath. This fight had been really dangerous. If the other had used the paper seal at the start, he would have been the one to lose. His eyes couldn't help but look at the gold paper seal that had landed in front of Wang Shixiang. The gold of the paper seal was much duller than before. This seal soldier can only be used one more time. Knowing what Zhuo Mo was thinking, Wang Shixiang said. Then I'll take it. Zhuo Mo said unhesitatingly. Even though he didn't want to have a grudge with the other, but the impression that this seal soldier gave him was too deep. He had never seen such a powerful, terrifying paper seal. Wang Shixiang didn't waste words. He threw the seal soldier to Zhuo Mo and then a jade scroll. This is the spell for the seal soldier. Zhuo Mo carefully took the seal soldier and jade scroll. This seal soldier was something that could protect his life. Jingshi was important, but his little life was even more important. Something that could protect his life, the more he had, the better. This guy called Wang might be a bit of a prodigal son, and was of few words, but Zhuo Mo felt he was much easier on the eyes than Lin Yuan. Wang Shixiang walked back among the disciples. He didn't have the energy to mind anything else, dropping to the ground, and sat cross-legged. His wounds were not insignificant. This battle had really been a series of up and downs. The people who had watched were also alarmed and shocked. Wang Shixiang's loss had caused many of the Lingying sect disciples' faces to turn ugly, especially the two that were up next, whose faces were like dirt. They were far from being as strong as Wang Shixiang, and had less jingshi than him. Just at this time, Chang Shixiang, who had been placed at the end, walked out. The Lingying sect disciples who had been making a commotion instantly quieted, their eyes looking straight at Chang Shixiang. Zhuo Mo's expression changed slightly. He just had received light internal injuries. This guy named Chang, it could be seen he wasn't a simple character. Was it that he couldn't wait any longer? Chang Shixiang suddenly turned, beckoning at the two who were up next, "Come here." The two exchanged a look, hesitated but still forced themselves to walk over. "You two do not have to fight, you aren't a match," Chang Shixiang said serenely. Turning, he said to Zhuo Mo, "Pick 2 items." Zhuo Mo was in a daze. Looking at the two people, he couldn't help but hesitate. Chang Shixiang turned his face back, his eyes landing on the two. The two were like frightened rabbits, hurriedly saying, "Chang Shixiang can make the decision." Zhuo Mo was not polite in demanding a belt and a pair of vambraces from the two. They were pretty good among third-grade items. The two did have pain on their faces, but obediently took it down, handing it off to Zhuo Mo. When Zhuo Mo took them, Chang Shixiang said to Lin Yuan, "1, red flower dan, 3rd grade." Lin Yuan grimaced. Without a second word, he took out a 3rd grade, red flower dan, throwing it to Chang Shixiang. Chang Shixiang then threw the 3rd grade, red flower dan, to Zhuemo, heal yourself first. Finishing, he sat down himself to rest. Zhuemo wasn't sanctimonious and shoved the red flower dan into his mouth. Up to now, this third-grade, red flower pill, was the highest grade lingdan that he had ever consumed. It turned into a hot stream, spreading through his organs, extremely comfortable. He didn't dare to slack off, channeling Ling power to dissolve the power of the medicine. There was a strange silence. It was like the peace before the storm, making people feel suffocated. Yan Mingzi said in a low voice, "Let's move back a bit." Hearing this, Hu Shan and Tao Zhuer also were startled awake, hurriedly falling back about 7 zhang. There were many people who also had the same idea as them. All the Lingying sect disciples seemed to understand each other and all moved back. The only people standing in their original spots were Wen Fei and a few others. The surrounding Xiuzha watched this migration. However, they did not move. They felt that the distance right now was enough to be safe. "Ha, they'll regret it later." Yan Mingzi mocked. "Yes, the horror of Chang Shixiang, you would only believe it after you experience it personally." Hu Shan said empathetically. "Who do you think will win?" Tao Zhuer asked. "Do we need to even discuss it? The scalping zombie might have some skill, but can he compare to Chang Shixiang? Let's hope that there won't be any blood. There isn't anyone here that could stop him." Terror filled Yan Mingzi's eyes. "Should we back up a bit more?" Yan Mingzi shuddered and couldn't help saying. "That's true." Yan Mingzi nodded. "Do you have the spirit traveling seal?" "I have 2. Hu Shan took out 2 spirit traveling seals. "Give me 1. Yan Mingzi hurriedly snatched one, holding it in a death grip. At the side, one person couldn't stop himself. "Do you have to exaggerate so much? Hasn't Chang Shixiang been relaxing and cultivating his personality?" Yang Mingzi, Hu Shan, and Tao Zhuer first paused and then all had sympathy on their faces as they looked at the person. The person couldn't bear the three's gaze, his face flushing. "Chang Shixiang is always writing sutras every day. I've seen it myself. He also raises ling beasts, so dumb." Yan Mingzi shook his head. "Idiot." Hu Shan rolled his eyes and spat out. "Let's move back a bit more." Tao Zhuer directly disregarded the person and said to the other 2. At this time, Zhuemo finally stood up. Chapter 100, Bloody Changheng. The moment Zhuemo stood up, Chang Shixiang opened his eyes and also stood. "I am Changheng." Changheng made a simple introduction. It looked as though he was talking of daily life with a friend. "I am Zhuemo," Zhuemo warily answered. For some reason, this Changheng that didn't show any signs of power made him feel pressure. A kind of pressure that he had only felt from Wei Shixiang. Taking the chance, he closely examined the other. A short pale green and grey robe that had faded from washing. It was abnormally different among the magnificent brocades of the Lingying sect disciples. A round face, short hair, the hair like wires, each strand sticking up. "You surprised me," Changheng continued. "I heard that your Shixiang Wei Sheng had comprehended sword essence but hadn't thought that you also had comprehended sword essence." A rumble instantly sounded from the surroundings. They might have inexperienced eyes and did not see Zhuemo's true power, but everyone knew what comprehending sword essence meant. The faces of Lin Yuan and the others relaxed. To say nothing of anything eyes, it wasn't an embarrassment to lose to a genius who had comprehended sword essence. Even Wang Shixiang, who was sitting on the ground, couldn't help but shake his head with a bitter smile. If he knew that Zhuemo had comprehended sword essence, he definitely wouldn't have stepped out to fight. Everyone's eyes as they looked at Zhuemo were completely different, full of awe and respect. Of course, there was also some jealousy and envy among those. Zhuemo shook his head. "I can't compare to Shixiang." He was extremely shocked inside. Changheng could tell his power level with a look. His own cultivation definitely wasn't weak. You do not have to be too modest. Changheng carelessly waved his hand, I will find Wei Xing in the future. Seeing the other speak so carelessly of Wei Xing Xixiang, Sua Mo was very uncomfortable inside and snorted, let's compete first before saying so. Changheng shook his head, you are not a match for me. How would you know before we try? Sua Mo said, discontent. I'm on the verge of becoming Ningmai. Changheng's light words made Sua Mo speechless. Sua Mo had to admit that Changheng was right. The cultivation between them differed too much. His cultivation had grown furiously, but it was only the 4th level of Zhuji right now. The other was on the verge of Ningmai, which was the 10th level of Zhuji. Even though he had once won against a Zhuji Xiuzhe when he was a Lianqi, but he was very clear that half of the reason could be attributed to his opponent. His opponent now was Changheng. Sua Mo couldn't help but glance at the other. The steadiness of the other's attitude, and the oppressing pressure made him believe the other was very strong. Sua Mo's battle experience was now extremely rich. What people he could fight, what people he should avoid, Sua Mo was very clear. I surrender. Which item do you want? Sua Mo blurted out very quickly. He had come for wealth. Now that he had made so much, even if he surrendered this one, he had already won 4. Such rich prizes, he was already content. From a glance, it could be seen that he wasn't on the same level as Changheng and definitely had no chance of victory. It would be better to admit defeat. If he was wounded by the other, then he would have a deficit. As a businessperson, a sense of when to retreat was essential. Sua Mo comforted himself. Changheng started at Sua Mo for a beat and smiled, you are a smart person. I just know my limits, Sua Mo said as he raised his hands. He wanted to leave very badly. The longer he stayed, the more he felt this mediocre-looking man was dangerous. Chang Xixiang can pick whatever item you want. This little brother will present it with both hands. Changheng was not moved, his eyes looking in the distance, indifferently saying, if you can survive one of my moves, then leave with the things. If you can't receive it, then leave behind everything. Sua Mo's heart jumped. The easier Changheng talked, the more unsafe he felt. Chang Xixiang, this little brother, the place I stand, you have to abide by my rules. Changheng didn't turn his eyes. The surrounding crowd were silent. Even the air seemed to become dense and murderous. Everyone couldn't help but stop breathing. They all knew that the most spectacular part of the day had arrived. All of the Lingying sect disciples were excited. The dominance that Changheng Xixiang displayed totally conquered them. Even Tao Zhu Er's large eyes didn't want to leave Changheng Xixiang's body for an instant. Up until now, Changheng hadn't displayed any power, and didn't make any motions. However, he was like the owner of the land, extremely matter-of-fact, and unable to be doubted. Sua Mo took a deep breath. He realized that he could not avoid this fight. The request the other gave was not outrageous. He only had to endure one of the other's moves, and it would count as Sua Mo's victory. If he didn't agree, then all the victories he had today would instantly turn to dust. The other had enough reason to surrounding him. The move that Changheng used was the one that Sua Mo used before. He first put himself at a disadvantageous position, and then forced the other to walk the path he picked. This feeling, it really was bad. Sua Mo shook his head, and threw these distracting thoughts to the back of his head. Today's battle, it was all on this one move. However, even a Ningmai cultivator, they shouldn't be able to say they could get rid of him in one move. Since he could not avoid it, then come. Thinking it through, Sua Mo adjusted himself into position and said calmly, as Xixiang wishes. Not bad. I like you, Changheng nodded in praise. He then opened his clothes, revealing a bare upper half. In between his clavicles, there was a copper ring. What was that for? The Xianxia in the surroundings were also puzzled. They began putting their heads together and discussing it. It was the complete opposite of the Lingying sect disciples. Excitement was on all of their faces, each one arching their necks, staring tightly at Chang Shixiang as though some exciting thing was going to happen. Zuo was also slightly puzzled, but he kept his guard up, not daring to slack off. Changheng closed his eyes, his right hand touching the copper ring between his clavicles. Then he did a move that shocked everyone, he slowly pulled on the copper ring. Hiss! Connected below the copper ring was a blood-red blade. It was slowly pulled out of the flesh of Changheng's chest. There wasn't any pain on Changheng's body. Quite the opposite, his expression was slightly warm and intoxicated. Zuomo's hairs stood as he looked at the weird and bloody picture in front of him. Not just Zuomo, but almost everyone in the surroundings had a terrified expression. Some that were less brave already had run to the side and started to heave. "Too savage," Yan Mingzi trembled, saying with excitement. When this blood-red sword was completely pulled out of Changheng's body, the terror reached the bones of every single person. This was a very strange sword. The sword was not long, about 1 qi long, 2 fingers wide. The body was entirely blood-red. There was no sword guard or grip. The blood-red blade connected directly to the copper ring. The width of the ring was just enough to be worn on the fingers. What was strange was that there was no wound on Changheng's body, the spot between his clavicles was smooth and markless. The scene was just a man holding a slightly strange red flying sword, but anyone who had seen what had preceded it definitely would not be able to forget it. Such a weird and bloody scene. Changheng opened his eyes, his expression normal. His voice hadn't changed at all compared to before. This ring sword is called Blood Spider. Zuomo felt his skin prickle. As though he was facing a great enemy, his hands as they held the sword couldn't help but start sweating. If the pressure that Changheng had given him before could be said to be faint but omnipresent. Then the Changheng with Blood Spider on his hand gave him an ocean of pressure, without any place for him to escape. The sudden change in pressure could cause those who had weak minds to collapse in that instant. Zuomo had a feeling that everyone in front of his eyes gradually became dyed with a layer of blood red. Zuomo reflexively tightened his grip on the water-drop sword. The sword suddenly passed him a warm and serene water essence. Even though it was extremely faint, at this time, it dramatically decreased his nervousness. No. If this kept on going, he would lose without even fighting. Zuomo closed his eyes and stopped his breathing. Then he started using embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation. The Ling power in his body started to move, and his consciousness started to become lively. Gradually, the terror in Zuomo's heart started to decrease. His fretful heart gradually became serene. At some time, a bloodline appeared in Changheng's eyes. He gave a praising glance at Zuomo. In the eyes of other people, this look caused a coldness to spread from the bottom of their hearts, like a savage blood spider coldly focusing on his prey. He lightly swung his finger. The bloody spider sword, on his finger spun rapidly, creating a bloody red circle of light. As the blood spider sword spun faster, it started to ring. Gradually, the ringing became an extremely icy hiss. An extremely domineering and savage presence, with Changheng at the center, appeared. At this time, the spectators nearby had pale faces. They all wanted to turn and escape. However, they found that their legs were wobbly. Crash, crash, they all fell to the ground. There was only someone wearing a black gauze hat standing at his original spot. His clothes flapped in the wind, but the gauze in front of face didn't move at all. What could be barely made out through the gauze was a pair of narrow and knife-sharp eyes. Zuomo felt that he was in a sea of blood. Enormous blood waves roiling and howling, smashing against each other, blocking out the sun. He was like a little boat, extremely small, floating uncertainly as though he would be swallowed by the gigantic waves at any instant. Suddenly, a blood wave rose in front of him, transforming into an extremely ugly blood beast, opening his jaws and howled as it leapt at him. Gripping the water-drop sword, having stopped his breathing and closed his eyes, all of Zuomo's Ling power had all been sent into the water-drop sword. The water-drop sword was like a little river, waves rippling, changing constantly. As the gigantic mouth was going to swallow him, he slowly raised the little river in his hand. The little river that had been the water-drop sword suddenly changed. Flames rose out of the water, spreading a shocking cold. The short little river moved and swayed like the tide. If Suemo could see it, he would find that the present appearance of the water-drop sword was the same as the sword river in his consciousness. Blossoms of water-shaped flames, as they spat, they would also create countless icicle-like sword energies. The movement of the tide continuously became larger, the water-shaped flames burning fiercely, the icy energy rising. It was as though Zuomo was holding a ball of flame in his hand. All the clothing on his body turned to pieces. With an angry shout, using all the energy in his body, from the bottom rising against the current up, he forcefully sliced. The first time after he merged the sword essences, Li water burning heavens. With the flame as the center, countless tiny sword essences crisscrossed, forming a shapeless sword essence net. Zuomo's body slightly wavered, shocked inside. The shout from the blood spider actually could harm his spirit. If his spirit wasn't much more powerful than normal Xianxia, he would have been greatly wounded by that. The surrounding Xianxia were much worse off. Most of the Xianxia that had been lying on the ground paled. Their consciousness were greatly wounded. Only the Xianxia that was wearing a hat was not moved, seemingly unaffected. Lucky we went back far enough. The Lingying sect disciple that had been objecting to Yang Mingzi and the others was full of relief. Even though they were far enough away, but he still was affected. His chest seemed to be roiling and wanting to throw up. His eyes as they looked at Chang Shixiang instantly filled with awe. No one paid attention to him. Yan Mingzi gaped. Pointing at Chang Heng, he suddenly turned his face to ask, who said Chang Shixiang was relaxing and cultivating his mind. Hu Shan and Tao Zhuer looked in shock at each other. Chang Shixiang's power, compared to a few years ago, was even more terrifying. The battle had reached the climax. The blood spider didn't dodge. Instead it raised its head and reached with its forelimbs to slice at the water-drop sword. The stream of blue flame that was the water-drop sword accurately hit the blood spider's forelimbs. The moment the two impacted, a thick bloody light rose around the blood spider, sheltering it. The blue flame sword essences hit the blood light around the blood spider, icy spraying but basically unable to break its defense. Boom! The true body of the blue flame directly hit the blood light. The blood light, which hadn't moved at all before, suddenly started to shake. The bloody light moved relentlessly as though it could shatter at any time. Arg! The blood spider gave a sky-shaking howl, its voice filled with fury. The blood light around its body suddenly increased, the thick blood light seeming composed of countless amounts of fresh blood, so congealed it seemed real. Zuomo instantly felt the pressure increase. The pressure in front of the water-drop sword was so great that he had never felt it before. It was like murderous intent was hitting in from all directions. The water-drop sword was like a fish caught in a net. At this time, Zuomo didn't have any other thoughts. Jingshi, talismans, they were all thrown out of his head. In his eyes, there was only the blood spider and the water-drop sword. The Ling power furiously moved. He didn't need any benefit or simulation. The blood spider gave Zuomo a pressure of death that he had never felt before, forcing him instinctively to use his full power. He forgot this was a spar, forgot the agreement of one move. All the Ling power in his body was channeled into the water-drop sword. The flood of battle spirit, and the terror of death at the bottom of his heart, entwined like twins, deeply provoked Xuemo. All of his calmness, all of his intelligence turned to dust at this time. What remained was the most basic instincts, the instinct to fight, the instinct to live. At some unknown time, Xuemo suddenly floated into the sky. The next scene struck everyone completely dumb. What is that? Yang Mingzi stammered to ask. Hu Shan's face was full of shock, unconsciously muttering, "It isn't possible, this isn't possible." Tao Zhuer's face paled like paper. Wang Xixiang, who had been sitting, suddenly jumped up, looking in disbelief at Xuemo. The expression on Wenfei, who had been watching attentively, suddenly changed. Lin Yuan, not far away, also stared in shock. The black gauze of the hat-wearing Xiuzhe, who had been standing steadily, rippled fiercely, like a furious wind blew past. Even Changheng, who was coldly standing behind the blood spider, showed shock. The Ling energy surrounding Xuemo as he floated in mid-air, headed for Xuemo at terrifying speeds. He was like a whirlpool, crazily absorbing the surrounding Ling energy. In reality, the Ling energy at the gates of Ling Ying sword sect wasn't dense. However, the suction inside Xuemo's body was too powerful. After he sucked in the Ling energies in the surroundings, he started to pull on Ling energy from further away. This kind of rough suction of Ling energy, no one had seen it before. Even more, this was sucking in Ling energy as he fought. This was too fantastical. Xuemo didn't know the shock he gave others. Right now, he was like a beast at death's edge, all of his attention on the blood spider in front of him. He put all the ideas he could think of into use. Gambling everything. He completely disregarded the tearing pain from his channels. Without calculating the consequences, he furiously took in the surrounding Ling energy. The blue flame became even brighter. As the impure Ling energy was sent in, it didn't burn quietly anymore, but with crackles and bangs. If the blue flame had previously been as quiet as a virgin, then the present flame was like an infuriated brawny man. A sliver of fear came through the blood spider's eyes, but it quickly became even more furious. This average little boy in front of it dared to repeatedly challenge its dominance. It had even been, for one moment, afraid of him. He was completely infuriated. Aro! The size of the blood spider exploded. In the blink of an eye, it had increased multiple times. Standing there, it was like a little mountain. The blood light on its body turned from light to dark. It was like there was a thick layer of congealed blood covering its entire body. Occasionally, dark red blood would drip to the ground, sending up wisps of green smoke, a burnt hole appearing on the ground. Everyone knew that the battle had reached the most crucial time. Suddenly, one red light and one blue light moved at the same time. They chose to use the most straightforward and brutal way, like two raging bulls, crashing together. Boom! Everyone felt a blinding light and couldn't not see anything else. The ground under their feet shook. Other than feeling fear, they hurried to steady themselves. Before they could open their eyes, they heard Xuemo's voice come out of the air. Chang Shixiang's teachings, this little brother has managed to pass and will bid farewell now. See you in the future. When everyone opened their eyes, where could they find Xuemo's figure? The last round just now had been too amazing. Almost everyone had lost focus, dumb where they stood. When they regained their minds, and looked towards the field, the blood spider seemed depressed. The several CUN deep marks on the two forelimbs were alarming to see. There was nothing remaining of the bravado and fierceness just before. Changheng Shixiang was standing, eyes closed, his legs buried in the rock floor up to his knees. He was motionless. No one dared to go closer. A moment later, a sword light landed from the sky. It was an elder of Ling Ying's sect. He scanned the surroundings. Noticing the wounded and dejected blood spider, his face slightly changed and sternly shouted, "What just happened?" The disciples murmured. Lin Yuan saw the eyes turn towards him and could only go forward to give a simple narration. Humph, Wukong's sword sect is too bold. The light in this Ling Ying sect elder's eyes grew as he snorted coldly. When his eyes moved towards Changheng that was still motionless with closed eyes, joy suddenly came into his eyes. Just at this time, Changheng opened his eyes, a flash of blood red flashing and disappearing from his eyes. He raised his head and howled to the sky. Wen Fei first paused and then had a gleeful expression. Changheng was extremely refreshed. He had managed to smoothly break through the barrier that he had been stuck at for a long time. Today, he finally entered Ningmai. After a while, he looked in the direction that Suemo had disappeared in, an amused expression on his face. The Shilja wearing the hat looked for a moment at Changheng and turned to leave. On the gray-beaked goose, Suemo's face was gray. His clothes were covered with blood. He had been gravely wounded in the last round, and had spat blood multiple times. In order to leave earlier, he had forced his Ling power out and relied on it to head straight towards the place he had put the gray-beaked goose. This was why his wounds had been worsened. He only had one thought in his head, to get back even quickly to the sect. Heavily wounded, Suemo felt his body was increasingly heavy. He motionlessly laid on the back of the gray-beaked goose and became unconscious. The gray-beaked goose seemed to know that the situation was grave, powerfully waving the wings and furiously flying in the direction of Wukong's sword sect. Suddenly, a five-colored light lit up on Suemo's chest. Inside the five-colored light, lines of green-colored energy came out and, following the channels in the body, spread into Suemo's limbs and organs. In the consciousness, Pu Yao was looking in interest at this scene. So interesting, I really want to crack it open. You're tuning into the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.